Chapter 658. In the Western Courtyard's pharmacy, the atmosphere was tense. Lulua's eyes were grave. "You've seen them?" "No, but they took away a friend of mine." "I have to save her," said Ningchen. Lulua was silent for a moment. After a long time she sighed. "Give up. It's impossible for your friend to still be alive. Those people are from the Nether Hall. They originate from the spirit realm's star system. In ancient times, they coexisted with the underworld and were extremely powerful. Those people who took away your friend are patrollers from the Nether Hall. They're in charge of finding all kinds of special constitutions to refine corpse gods. As long as she's taken away by them, she'll definitely die." Ning Chen's body trembled and his fists cracked. His true essence surged and his killing intent was difficult to suppress. "Don't use your true qi. Your injuries haven't healed yet," Lulua warned him. Drops of blood dripped down. It was very dazzling. Ning Chen wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth and suppressed the true essence surging through his body. His expression calmed down once more, but the bone-chilling coldness in the depths of his eyes was difficult to conceal. "Right now, you should recover your body. Whether it's that old monster or the Nether Hall, neither of them are easy to deal with. Don't act impulsively before your injuries are healed," said Luo. "I understand." Ningchen nodded and agreed softly. Boom. Just as the two of them were talking, a heaven-shaking collision rang out from a nearby courtyard. The shockwaves caused the entire pharmacy to shake. Lulua sensed it and her expression sank. A red light flashed from the pharmacy and quickly rushed to the eastern courtyard. In the main courtyard, purple light and devil chi surged. The collision of sword light caused intense shockwaves to spread. The heaven-shaking power was shocking. Purple Marquis' immortal treading aura surged. His sword was covered in purple chi, each of his moves chasing after the soul. On the other hand, the devil cultivator's devil sword was similarly fierce and merciless. Each of his moves could split a mountain. After exchanging several blows, the sword light crisscrossed. The residence that had been abnormally calm was now showing signs of collapse. A moment later, Hong Yi entered the battle. Qing Shuang and Bai Hong appeared at the same time. Their swords blocked each other's attacks. With a bang, the battle came to an end. In that shocking collision, blood spurted out. The three of them separated and were forced back several steps. Xia Zi and Purple Marquis' expressions. "Ninth brother Zi," Purple Marquis said in a low voice. Xia Zi stepped forward and channeled his elemental energy into Hong Yi's body to suppress her injuries. "Do you want to die?" Xia Zi said coldly after a brief moment. Ning Chen coughed out a mouthful of blood as exhaustion flashed in his eyes. "Seventh senior brother, Zi, we can't attack our own people." Ning Chen had just stabilized himself when he coughed up another mouthful of blood and spoke weakly. In the room, who had been woken up by the commotion, saw him and her expression changed. She ran forward and asked with tears in her eyes, "Are you all right?" In the west, a green light flashed past and Lulua appeared. Her slender hand guided the threads, turning them into endless vitality that entered the former's body. As the vitality entered his body, Ning Chen's injuries gradually stabilized, and his chaotic Xin Yuan calmed down. "Zi Chuan." After stabilizing the former's injuries, Lulua looked at the nearby Purple Marquis with a cold expression. "How long are you going to be so impulsive? Have you forgotten who killed your second senior sister?" Hearing this, Purple Marquis trembled and his eyes dimmed. Seeing his expression, Lulua did not continue speaking. She looked at the others and said, "We can't stay here any longer. With such a big commotion, it will definitely attract the experts of the Jinsi dynasty. Now is not the time for us to expose ourselves. Pack up quickly and leave immediately." Speaking of this, Lulua looked at the little girl and said, You're responsible for taking care of your master. Wait here." Nodded vigorously. "Zi Chuan, come with me to pack up the pharmacy," Lulua said with an unpleasant expression. "Okay." Purple Marquis did not dare to refute and replied. "Xia Zi, you stay here and guard. If anyone comes, you're responsible for blocking them," Lulua continued. "Okay." Xia Zi replied calmly. After that, Lulua took Purple Marquis to the east courtyard and quickly prepared to leave. In the courtyard, Xiazi released his divine sense to guard against the experts of the Jinsi dynasty. Not far away, Ningchen closed his eyes and suppressed his injuries. His old injuries had not healed, and after the impact just now, they were showing signs of erupting again. Inra still had tears in the corner of her eyes. She stood beside him worriedly and looked at the black-robed demonic cultivator from time to time. Her small mouth was pouting, full of dissatisfaction. Xiazi acted as if he did not see it. His eyes were cold as he looked at the starry sky, guarding against the enemies who might come at any time. Suddenly, the sky changed and the wind and clouds became chaotic. A large hand fell from the sky and crashed down. The powerful power surpassed the boundary of the mortal world and reached the immortal realm. The guardian finally made his move. The destructive power crushed the surrounding houses. Under the large hand, the demonic cultivator's expression turned cold. He waved his hand and a demonic weapon appeared, pretending to be a ghost. The demonic sword shone brightly and rays of black light shot into the sky. The surging demonic power collided with the palm in the sky. With a loud explosion, more than half of the mansion collapsed. The shocking scene shocked everyone. In the aftermath, Ningchen stood up and protected Yin-Er beside him. He looked at the wind and clouds in the sky with a heavy expression. "You don't need to do anything. Leave this person to me," Xiazi said indifferently. He flipped his palm and gathered his demonic yuan. Within the surging black demonic waves, the demonic sword transformed and a world-shaking power appeared. Reincarnation. The sword spun and thousands of swords appeared. An incomparably vigorous sword flow furiously charged into the wind and clouds. In the western courtyard's pharmacy, Purple Marquis' expression became serious. He flipped his palm and scattered the raging waves. "It's the Northern King." Lulua also sensed the pressure from the sky and said in a serious voice, "The 4 kings of the Golden Dawn Empire live up to their reputation. They'll be here soon," said Purple Marquis. "Continue to guard this place. Xiazi should be able to handle the other side." Lulua instructed and then quickly packed up the drawers of precious herbs. In the eastern courtyard, the battle between the demonic cultivators and kings was becoming more and more intense. The northern king of the Golden Dawn Empire, who had yet to appear, raised his hand and stirred up the wind and clouds. He wanted to suppress the demonic cultivators. Below, Ningchen protected Yin. Not far away, Xiazi released his body and used all his strength to deal with the enemy. The 6-foot-long Mad Doomsday was surrounded by demonic energy. When the battle started, it became white-hot. The terrifying aftermath destroyed the surrounding houses and half the city shook. An extraordinary expert. Ningchen looked at the huge hand in the dark clouds in the sky and said with a serious expression, "Trample the Celestial?" Yin-Er asked worriedly. "Yes, and it's very likely that he's at the peak of the virtual realm or even the corporeal realm." Ningchen nodded. Before he finished speaking, there was a loud explosion in the sky. The demonic energy scattered and the huge hand broke through the restraints and fell down. The ground collapsed. "Ha!" When the danger arrived, Ningchen waved his hand and summoned a white rainbow to help. However, there was a long shout. The black wings of sin spread out behind the demonic cultivator and a violent demonic energy surged out. "Bury the heavens." The sword's edge was immortal defying, and the demonic energy buried the heavens. The abnormally terrifying demonic energy turned into a cloud and crashed into the huge hand. In an instant, the violent collision resounded through the world and the sky changed color. In the aftermath, a purple-white man appeared. He was tall and straight, and his long hair fluttered in the wind. He was arrogant and charming. "He's finally here." Jinsi North King, Hua Changfeng. In the west courtyard, Lulua looked at the figure in the sky and said solemnly. Purple Marquis waved his hand and held his sword, but he was stopped when he was about to attack. "Don't attack first. If it's not necessary, we'd better not fight against the Jinsi dynasty. Xiazi is a demon, so it's more suitable for him to attack," Lulua said calmly. "Can he do it?" Purple Marquis didn't trust her. "His strength is much stronger than what you've seen," Lulua replied. Purple Marquis nodded and waved his hand to put away his sword. In the sky to the east of the west courtyard, Jinsi North King descended. The abnormally powerful pressure was like a mountain falling down, overturning the sky and splitting the sea. The earth was stirred up, and waves of dust rose into the sky. Ningchen waved his hand to shake off the slate and protect In the battlefield, the demon stood in the sky. His white hair fluttered, and his black sinful wings released a boundless pressure that made people feel a bone-deep fear. Hua Changfeng looked at the sinful wings behind the demon in front of him, and a strange light flashed through his eyes. What a terrifying demon! Although his realm wasn't high, this kind of pure demonic qi was beyond his understanding of demons. Xiaofeng! With a soft cry, an azure spear appeared. In an instant, wild winds howled and the void cracked. The king weapon appeared, and the ink sword shook at the same time. The peerless divine weapons were tit for tat. Hua Changfeng held the spear and condensed the wind and clouds of the 8 wastelands, gathering the spiritual yuan in all directions. The demon focused and waved his sword to block the attack. The shockwaves from the collision were like the sun in the dark night, illuminating the world. Drip. Blood dripped from the corner of the demon's mouth. The injuries he had suffered in the battle with Emo Zhu had shown that there were hidden dangers. You dare to block this king even though you're injured? I admire your courage. Hua Changfeng flipped his palm and slapped the spear. His true yuan shook and forced the demon in front of him back. True wind. The Xiaofeng spear spun, and azure light gathered. Heaven and earth changed, and the wind howled. A huge whirlpool hundreds of meters long appeared and descended. The pressure was indescribable. In the western courtyard, Purple Marquis' eyes were gloomy. He said, "Fourth senior sister, make your move." Wait a little longer. Lulua looked at the sky and narrowed her beautiful eyes. In the battle, a destructive gale descended, turning the sky and earth into nothingness. The terrifying danger was driving people crazy. Below, Jiming was heavily injured and couldn't dodge. Xia Zi's expression became serious, and he condensed all the demonic qi in his body. Blood flowed from his hands, dyeing the Doomsday Sword red. Forbidden technique, God's Descent. The Doomsday weapon trembled, and the black aura around the demon's soared into the sky. A phantom that looked down on all living things slowly descended from the demonic qi and merged with the demon's body. The demon opened his eyes and unfolded his 12 wings of sin. In an instant, black feathers flew between heaven and earth. He took a step, and in an instant he died with a sword. The wind dissipated, and the Xiaofeng spear collapsed. The demon's throat was split open, and blood gushed out. The demon's eyes were filled with disbelief. Even in death he couldn't understand. Below, Ningchen looked at the familiar yet strange friend in the sky. He couldn't hide the shock in his heart. Chapter 659. Within the Jinsi Imperial Palace, Sovereign Jinsi's expression changed as he looked to the north in shock. The North King was dead? How was that possible? Immediately summoned by Qin to the palace, said Sovereign Jinsi. Yes. A black figure appeared and disappeared after receiving the order. In the north of the Jinsi dynasty, in the east of Yanji City, in a secluded mansion, after a great battle, the entire mansion was devastated, and its original appearance could no longer be seen. Ning Chen's group didn't stay for long. They quickly packed up the medicinal herbs in the western courtyard and left. Now that the North King had died, the other 3 kings had also received the order to come. Not long after they left, a beautiful figure appeared in the sky. The East King had appeared, and his eyes were shining as he looked at the aftermath of the battle. While traveling to the west, Ningchen carried Xia Zi, who had fainted after using a forbidden technique, on his back. He didn't dare to slow down. He didn't trust anyone. Only in front of his best friend would he allow himself to let down his guard for a moment. Unbelievable! Behind the 3 of them, Lula sighed. Demons were naturally suspicious. They were actually willing to pay such a huge price to protect others. At this moment, the clouds in the sky began to rumble. A powerful will was approaching. This is the East King. Lula looked back at the churning clouds in the distance. I'll go stop her. Purple Marquis stopped and said, It's not time yet. Let's go, Lulua said in a low voice. Soon after, she increased her speed and rushed forward. Not long after, white lightning surged in the sky. A powerful pressure was no weaker than the North King's. By Qin, Ning Chen's expression sank. He immediately changed directions and headed northwest. Let's go to the far north. Lulua took a step forward, leading the way towards the extreme north. The three of them hadn't been traveling for long when another powerful aura appeared in the south. It was as hot as fire, as if it could burn the sky and boil the sea. The South King, said Purple Marquis. Before he even finished speaking, golden light spread over the western horizon. Even from far away, they could feel an unbearable pain from the sharp aura. The West King. The three kings arrived at the same time, followed by the divine generals. 4 powerful auras chased after them, determined to seek justice for Bei Feng's death. Ning Chen's group sped up as well, and they didn't stop for even a moment as they rushed towards the extreme north. The biting cold wind was unusually bone-piercing. The Jin Shi dynasty was vast and prosperous. Perhaps only the snow-covered extreme north was the end of the dynasty. Senior sister, we can't escape. Purple Marquis said with a grave expression as he looked at the pursuers coming from all directions. We can't. If we attack Sovereign Jin, she will immediately recognize us. Once Sovereign Jin Shi attacks, we'll be in trouble, said Lu. Ning Chen stopped. His eyes were silent. He handed Zi to the former and said calmly, I'll do it. 4th senior sister and 7th senior brother, take Zi and Tu'er and leave first. No, your injuries haven't healed yet. Staying behind by yourself is just suicide, said Lu. That's the only way. We can't expose senior sister and senior brother's identities for now. Don't worry, I have Phoenix origin. If I can't block them, I'll immediately withdraw, said Ning Chen softly. Ning Chen, I want to go with you. Tears flashed in Ina's eyes. She pulled on Ning Chen's clothes, unwilling to let go. Listen to me. You go with 4th senior sister first. If you stay, I won't be able to focus on the enemy, said Ning Chen gently. Come back alive. This true Yuan can help you find us. The situation was critical, and they couldn't delay. Lula didn't hesitate any longer. She waved her hand, and threads of green light entered Ning Chen's body. She didn't hesitate any longer and pulled the little girl deeper into the extreme north. 4th senior sister. Purple Marquis glanced at his junior brother behind him, unable to conceal his worry. Let's go, shouted Lulua coldly. Purple Marquis sighed and didn't dare stay any longer. Carrying Xia Zi, he quickly followed. Seeing the 4 of them leave, Ning Chen's expression calmed down. Looking at the 4 figures rushing over, his phoenix origin began to revolve. Red light flickered around him, making him seem like a divine sun in the dark night, illuminating the world as if it were daytime. Wind and clouds churned, and a blue-robed woman walked out. Her terrifying pressure surpassed the northern kings and reached the corporeal realm. The eastern king appeared. She was a peerless beauty, but her strength was ranked at the head of the 4 kings. Seeing the red-robed youth blocking her way, the eastern king didn't show much anger. Her eyes were calm. Come back with me. Impossible. Ning Chen waved his hand and a white light appeared. Then I'll have to offend you. The eastern king began to move. Her hands began to cleanse the clouds, and an incomparably vast aura swept out. The head of the 4 kings had the ability to reach the peak. When she attacked, she was like a goddess of war descending to the mortal world. Wind and clouds churned, and a huge whirlpool appeared. Her power shook everyone's hearts. The ground began to tremble, and the ground within 1,000 miles began to surge. Wherever the clouds passed, everything was destroyed. The red-robed youth stepped out of the dust, avoiding most of the power. However, he was still injured by the shockwaves. Drops of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, dyeing the ground red. With such heavy injuries, there's no way you can escape. Come back with me, said the Eastern King calmly. She was in a hurry to attack again. Sorry, I can't. Ning Chen stopped and his phoenix origin began to revolve, suppressing his injuries. Stubbornly persisting in going about things the wrong way will only harm yourself. The Eastern King glanced at the 3 surging auras behind her and sighed. She didn't delay any longer and used 1,000 clouds burying the heavens. In an instant, wind and clouds began to surge. Within the clouds, the immortals' robes fluttered, and an incomparably vigorous energy pressed down. The pressure was as heavy as a mountain, capable of splitting the heavens and splitting the seas. Before the attack arrived, Ningchen already felt the weight of the 1,000 mountains on his body. Although they were both kings, their cultivation had far surpassed the other 3 kings. They were close to Empress Jinxi's level. The clouds stagnated in the void, making it difficult to move. Ningchen swung his sword and stepped out, dodging the palm energy. The ground shook violently, and 1,000 miles sank. Blood stained the dust. Clang. The 2 swords clashed, and the sword light spread. White lightning surged in the dust. Divine General Bai Qin appeared and attacked. The lightning was extremely fast, and the phoenix was unparalleled. The killing move of the instant death raised a huge sand wave. After the Eastern King, the Divine General descended to the mortal world to kill knowing destiny. The Eastern King stood in the void, watching the rapidly changing battle. He didn't attack again. Where's the demon? The 2 swords clashed. Bai Qin looked at the person in front of her and asked. I don't know. Ningchen replied calmly. He clenched his left hand, and the blue frost sword appeared. He escaped. Then you'll pay with your life. Bai Qin's face darkened. She dodged the blue frost sword, turned her palm, and attacked Ningchen. The 2 swords clashed again. Light overflowed, and the paths of life and death were separated. The swords were chaotic, and the sound of the sword was like thunder and the cry of the phoenix. The Eastern King looked at the red-clothed young man in the battle. It was a pity that he had such amazing strength at such a young age. At this moment, the wind blew behind the battle. 2 figures appeared. They looked at the battle and then at the Eastern King. They frowned and asked, Eastern King, where are the others? They escaped, the Eastern King said calmly. Why didn't you chase them? The Western King asked. Someone stopped me, the Eastern King said calmly. The Southern King looked at the battle and said, Western King, continue chasing them. I'll help Bai Qin kill this person, and I'll catch up immediately. The Western King nodded and chased forward. Seeing that someone was about to pass through, Ningchen swung his sword and blocked the battle. His figure flashed and blocked the front. His sword soared into the sky and blocked the king. With a loud explosion, the sky sank and the earth fell. The Western King's footsteps paused as he was stopped. You're courting death. The Western King's face was filled with killing intent. He rushed forward, and a halberd appeared in his hand. The halberd's tip shone with a dazzling golden light and a sharp golden aura. With a clang, the sword and halberd clashed for the first time. The mournful white rainbow trembled, and the incomparably sharp Jinxi suppressed the white rainbow. Ningchen's blood spilled from his hand, dyeing the 2 weapons red. He swung his left hand with azure frost, exchanging injury for injury. The only sword at the pinnacle was something that even a king could not ignore. He swung his halberd and blocked the sword. Outside the battle, the Southern King saw that the battle was more difficult than he had expected. He condensed his fire yuan energy and jumped into the battle. The 2 kings joined forces, the divine generals attacked, and the 3 king realm experts hunted down the phoenix together. Sword form, sky splitting 9 suns. In the battle, Ningchen used the azure frost sword form with his left hand and the white rainbow sword into the 9 suns with his right hand. His sword aura was infused with the heavenly book martial arts. The pinnacle of the sword was shining brightly. 9 divine suns circled around. The 9 suns sank, and heaven and earth collapsed quickly. The 2 kings received the attack with the help of the divine generals. The rumbling sound reverberated throughout the world. The sword suns shattered, and the sword radiance rushed in all directions. The Eastern King waved his hand to disperse the sword aura in front of him. Looking at the brave warrior in the battle, his eyes flashed again. What a pity! Blood dyed the sky. The unyielding warrior did not back down. In order to save his friend and protect his disciple, he stood alone and blocked the 3 kings and the divine generals of Jinxi. The 2 swords clashed again with a loud clang. The two swords glowed brilliantly. White lightning and green frost collided. The rainbow flashed across the sky. The long halberd waved. The white rainbow shook the blue dome of heaven. The valiant sword, the valiant shadow. He was like a war god. The knowing destiny state fully unleashed, and the mastery on the sword broke through the dark clouds. Heaven and earth sensed it, and endless chains swayed, responding to the swordsman. The two kings looked cold, and the power of the treading celestials condensed. Their palms and halberds moved side by side, and the flames howled and the sharp metal broke through the 9 heavens. The white zither followed with her sword, and the sword was like a thunderstorm that broke the sky, leaving no room for maneuver. There was an earth-shattering collision, and dust filled the sky. In the rumbling, the red shirt retreated more than 10 steps, and the two swords touched the ground. Blood stained the sand. With the heavy injury, the phoenix could not spread its wings. Blood dripped down and stained the red shirt again and again. The Eastern King's figure flashed and blocked the 3 of them. He said calmly, "A brave swordsman should be respected. Send him on his way." The white zither divine general nodded and stepped forward. The white lightning attracted the thunder, and the sky lost its color. "Is there enough time?" On the ground, Ningchen looked back and saw that the leaving sword was no longer there. A touch of relief flashed across his tired face. He got up, held his sword, and his blood vitality dispersed, and rushed to the 9 heavens. Chapter 660. In front of the boundary marker in the extreme north, snow fell from the sky. White lightning fell from the sky. The merciless sword ended the life of the phoenix. Ha! At this moment, Ji Ming felt that his friends were far away. He slowly got up. Blood flowed from his arms and his swords left the ground. In an instant, blood chi surged and a strong force of the beginning of the world exploded. The phoenix spirit rushed to the 9 heavens and the heavenly fire shook the sky. The 4 symbols appeared. The green dragon, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise descended from the sky. The white tiger of the west and the phoenix took their places. The 4 ancient gods shone between heaven and earth. The moment the 4 symbols appeared, the white lightning sword dimmed. Under the impact of the gods' arrival, the lightning dissipated. Seeing this, the 2 kings' faces darkened. They stepped forward and gathered Hao Yuan to enter the battle again. Sword of the 4 symbols. Divine transformation. With a painful shout, the blood chi around Ji Ming rolled rapidly. In the sky, the 4 symbols gathered into one. The blood-red phoenix descended from the sky and slowly entered his body. Ning Chen's body was covered in blood mist. His black hair turned red instantly. The blood was dazzling and fluttering in the wind. The 4 symbols' divine transformation. The blood gathered in the body of Ji Ming. The power of the human world exploded. In the rolling blood chi, the 2 swords converged. The phoenix fire rose to the extreme. The astral soul that had been cultivated for countless days was finally formed. The blood-red sword shone in the human world. Ning Chen held the sword. His blood-red hair flowed backward. The god in the fire had descended to the human world. The blood-red astral soul opened the way. The battle started again. The heaven and earth trembled. Ji Ming forced himself to become a divine transformation. His blood chi burned. His sword changed the weather and 1,000 miles turned into a sword domain. The swords clashed. The 2 different powers. The divine general Bai Qin retreated. The sword's power backfired. The corner of her mouth was red. Blood dripped down, blooming on the ground. The invincible divine general's sword was stained with blood. The 2 kings were shocked. The western king waved his halberd. Golden light rose and streaked across the night sky. The southern king also gathered the source of the fire. The power of burning the sky and boiling the sea approached Ji Ming. The battle between the 2 kings started again. The boundless Haoyan shook the heaven and earth. The sound of clashing rang in his ears and in his heart. Knowing destiny leaned forward and attacked. The primordial blood on his sword overflowed, frightening gods and ghosts. Divine General Bai Qin stepped forward and white lightning surged on her sword. The lightning that spanned tens of thousands of feet tore through the void. The 2 swords clashed again. The light of a cultivator's life bloomed beautifully in the moment of battle. The world-shocking killing trap was flawless and flawless. There was no way to escape. In the battle, knowing destiny leaped out with his sword. In a flash, his sword drew many graceful strokes. The four symbols returned to his body and he turned into a deity. His combat power was so terrifying that it shocked the three people once again. Outside the battle, Dong Wang's raised hand hesitated as he saw He Yong's unparalleled figure in the battle. Condensing blood origin, phoenix ancestral awakening, the ninth son of Mo Gate, a peerless genius. However, the hero was short of breath. Heavenly Dragon shock. His astral soul slashed out as the Azure Dragon roared. A gigantic dragon god manifested in the night sky, soaring out of the sea as it rushed towards the two kings. Seeing this, West King stood up and blocked the attack. With a flip of his palm, rays of golden light gathered and boundless sharp metal chi swirled. His halberd broke through the waves and slashed towards the Azure Dragon. Amidst the shocking explosion, South King passed by with fire true flames surging on his palm. On the other side, Bai Qin stepped forward. Her sword shook the clouds and lightning bolts boosted the flames. Heavenly Dragon Phoenix Burial. Two strong cultivators arrived. Red robes flashed as the primordial chi on the sword surged. A dragon and a phoenix appeared and met the attack head-on. Rumbling sounds could be heard from the collision. Before he could catch his breath, West King arrived once again. His halberd danced, dazzling golden light shone. Ugh! With a groan, knowing destiny's mouth turned red. Blood continued to flow out of his mouth. He moved his astral soul and counterattacked. Space break! A sword broke through the air. The sword was so close that it was too late to dodge. West King took the sword head-on. He groaned and retreated a few steps. As the Western King retreated, Divine General Bai Qin immediately rushed forward. Lightning flashed and arrived in the blink of an eye. Her sword was like a bolt of lightning rushing out of the sea. Her astral soul met the attack with the same speed. She didn't use her sword intent. The only sword at the peak suppressed the white lightning. Under the night sky, the blood-haired figure was extraordinary. He was a martial artist, a swordsman, and a knowing destiny. He had learned the sword for 30 years. His talent was ordinary, but he had surpassed all the geniuses of his generation. The path of the sword required talent, perseverance, and tempering. Knowing destiny wasn't favored by the heavens. His talent was ordinary. However, his hard work changed his choice of the sword. 30 years. From the beginning until today, knowing destiny couldn't lose. He didn't dare to lose. He couldn't die. He forced himself to walk down this path again and again. He didn't expect that this path would last for 30 years. Snowflakes fell. In the extremely cold weather, the phoenix fire weakened a little. However, the swordsman's battle intent didn't weaken at all. His sword reflected under the moonlight. Enough. You've done well. Really well. Outside the battle, East King sighed. He had to take action in the end because of the imperial order. East King moved. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged and thunder rumbled. The leader of the four kings once again displayed his peerless power. His slender hands slapped and the sky fell. The power of destruction descended. In the battle, knowing destiny waved his sword and shook off the two kings. Looking at the clouds pressing down from the sky, he took a step and soared. The phoenix spread its wings and lifted the 9 heavens. The clouds suppressed the gods. East King walked gracefully. Clouds surrounded his body. He was like an immortal in the mortal world. The heavenly power shook the universe. Ha! Below the clouds, knowing destiny shouted. His blood-red hair danced wildly. The divine weapon made of astral soul iron essence broke through the shackles. The starlight in the 9 heavens sensed it and gathered. The dazzling sword light could kill an immortal. No one can take my life, not even the heavens. His body was bathed in blood. Knowing destiny refused to accept the heavens. His body burned like a divine furnace. The blood-red phoenix fire reflected the 9 heavens. He was unyielding. He had a strong will to live. He reversed life and death and refused to enter the underworld. In this life, she hadn't woken up yet. How could he die? Rumbling sounds of thunder rang out as millions of lightning bolts descended upon the world. The phoenix defied the heavens and angered Xianzong. Heavenly punishment descended, and death reappeared. As the azure frost sword appeared, the wind and snow became chaotic. As ice and fire intersected, the yin-yang taiji diagram spiraled into the air and blocked the heavenly punishment. When the yin and yang formation appeared, the three of them felt their bodies sink. Amidst the convergence of yin and yang, 10,000 spells trembled in sorrow. Dong Wang sighed in his heart as he looked at the man who was bleeding profusely. However, he did not show any mercy in his moves. He broke through the yin-yang aura and arrived before the man in an instant. The vast and mighty cloud energy crushed the void as it slammed its palm toward the former. It was emotionless and merciless, taking everything in one strike. The tip of the sword blocked the clouds, and with the help of yin and yang, it exploded with a loud bang. The yin-yang great formation shook violently, unable to withstand the aftershocks, showing signs of collapse. Descent of the Six Tao, myriad demonic tribulations, supreme forbidden sword. In the collapsing yin and yang formation, knowing destiny held his sword horizontally. Blood flowed out of his left hand like a tidal wave. In an instant, the remaining power of the entire formation rolled wildly and poured into the sword. The forbidden sword appeared. Hong Yi took a step forward and leapt into the 9 heavens. The extreme might of the sword spread out. 10,000 swords appeared in the world and floated in the horizon. Doomsday catastrophe. As soon as the words fell, 10,000 swords fell, annihilating everything below. The destructive might and the doomsday scene made people feel fear from the depths of their hearts. When the 3 kings saw this, their expressions turned serious. They released their aura. Clouds rose, flames surged, and golden light shone brightly. Divine General Baiqin also absorbed the thunder from the 9 heavens into her sword to help the 3 kings. Together, they resisted the doomsday move. Supreme forbidden sword, silence of the mortal world. The unparalleled ultimate move of the sword descended with destruction. It entered everyone's eyes and slowly entered their hearts. When the aftershocks dissipated, the 2 kings were dyed red. The divine general flew out. The might of the sword shook the heavens and the earth. Dong Wang waved his hand. The clouds surged and scattered the waves of dust. He looked at the phoenix, whose vital essence was almost exhausted. He raised his hand and the clouds turned into torrents. Wave after wave of huge waves split the sky and swept across the world. In the huge waves, knowing destiny used what little vital essence he had left. It was heavy, slow, and condensed. Rays of sword light coiled up and became more and more intense. Like a storm, it rose rapidly into the sky. The pinnacle of the sword, the only one at the peak, the dazzling sword will rumbled. Combined with the swordsman's unyielding will, it blocked the shocking torrents. Enough! Dong Wang turned his palm. With a boom, the torrents scattered the sword light. The scattered blood splashed into the waves and dyed the clouds red. At the end of the battle, knowing destiny who was under the bloody hair kept bleeding from the corners of his mouth. His blood chi and genuine essence were exhausted. Only his unyielding will spread between heaven and earth. His sword will appeared and disappeared without a beginning or an end. In this grand battle, the 2 kings were injured and the divine general was dyed red. Even though they were opponents, the 4 could not hide their respect for him. He had not reached the treading celestial realm and was seriously injured, but he still managed to delay them until now. There was no other person in the world who could do this. The sword will in the void was still sharp. However, the 3 kings knew that this battle was over. Although the phoenix was strong, it could not spread its wings again. Dong Wang walked forward step by step. The clouds around him dispersed the sword will in the void. His beautiful face was solemn and calm. Warriors had their dignity. Such a brave warrior deserved their respect. Have a safe journey back to the netherworld. As soon as he finished speaking, the clouds rose and the clouds changed. A raging sea appeared in the world. The last move was extremely powerful. It was the last respect a king had for a swordsman. The Hall of the Dead wants the body of the phoenix. At this moment, a change occurred. The void rolled and a huge vortex appeared. 13 figures walked out with coffins on their backs. All of them were above the treading celestial realm. Their powerful auras covered the cold moon and the 9 heavens. It was shocking. The East King frowned when she saw who it was. She flipped her palm and was about to attack when she heard an authoritative voice in her ear. "Don't attack. Retreat." Sovereign Jin Shi's voice was heard by the 3 kings and Divine General Bai Qin at the same time. It was cold and unquestionable. Dong Wang's eyes flashed. He glanced at the people of the Hall of the Dead, snorted, and turned to leave. "Phoenix, since you can stop me, don't die in the hands of these people." The last words disappeared with the light blue battle suit. Dong Wang left and disappeared into the night sky. Western King and Southern King looked at each other and left as well. Their figures merged into the void and disappeared silently. Divine General Bai Qin sighed. He looked at the 9th son of the Mahist clan in front of him with a complicated expression. He also left the battle without saying a word. Drip, drip. Amidst the thunder, the sound of blood dripping was so soft that it was almost undetectable. The knowing destiny who was in charge of bringing up the rear had forcefully reverted to his ancestral form and turned into a deity. His chi and blood were almost exhausted. Gray fog spread around the 13 netherworld envoys. Iron chains shot out and locked the phoenix in the void. Chapter 661. In the extreme north, the Hall of the Dead's patrollers appeared, and the 3 kings left. The battle became even more dangerous. The 13 netherworld envoys carried black coffins on their backs, and a gray aura surrounded them. The strong and strange aura made it seem like the death god had descended. The chains swayed, and streaks of black light shot out from the hands of the 13 netherworld envoys, locking onto the phoenix in the void. The earth shook, and the aftermath of the battle did not stop. Fresh blood turned into a bloody mist, and sword intent rumbled, filling the void and creating deep rifts in the void. As the chains attacked, the red-robed man supported his injured body and stood up again. His tired eyes looked at the crisscrossing chains around him, and he used the last of his true essence. Suddenly, the image of a phoenix appeared. As the chains rumbled, a huge chariot appeared. The chariot's body was bronze, and it shone with a cold light. "Finally, all of you are here." On the chariot, knowing destiny's figure staggered and vomited a mouthful of blood. He forcefully supported his injured body and said tiredly, "God-slaying chariot." Seeing the huge chariot appear in the sky, the 13 netherworld envoys' expressions darkened. This person actually had a war machine from the ancient western celestial world. The god-slaying chariot appeared, and its mountain-like body appeared in the sky, giving off an indescribable pressure. The war machine that shocked the 4 celestial worlds had appeared again after hundreds of thousands of years. The phoenix blood entered the chariot, and the sky was filled with blood. Amidst the dazzling red light, the god-slaying chariot changed. The chariot's artifact spirit swallowed the phoenix blood and slowly recovered. The chariot shook, and the chariot turned into a ghost phoenix. The huge chariot exploded with a strong murderous aura, and streaks of black light shot out, instantly dispersing the crisscrossing chains. The night wind rustled, and it sounded like thousands of Buddhas were chanting. The battle that had lasted for a long time changed again. The black ghost phoenix appeared, and its murderous aura spread. Pointless struggle. The 13 netherworld envoys snorted and stepped forward. The chains extended out like the hands of the death god. In front of the chains, a gray aura of death circled and turned into 13 ferocious beasts. The beasts opened their huge mouths and tried to swallow the ghost phoenix. The ghost phoenix and the ferocious beasts clashed, and their murderous auras collided. The night wind and clouds surged, and the sky and earth collapsed. Everything in front of them was covered in snow, and everything in front of them. On the chariot, the exhaustion in knowing destiny's eyes became more and more obvious. He turned his sword and the aura of the heavenly book was fully released. Suddenly, the 9 suns rose into the sky, shining their dazzling brilliance on the ground. The book of sun appeared, and the heavenly book summoned. Among the 13 Netherworld envoys, moonlight rose from the coffin behind one of them. The Book of Moon responded, and a strange phenomenon appeared. Found it. Ningchen looked at the Netherworld envoy in front of him. His silhouette flashed, and he appeared behind the Netherworld envoy in an instant. He waved his sword, threatening to kill the Netherworld envoy. The 7th Netherworld envoy snorted coldly. He flipped his palm to receive the energy and forcefully blocked the sword. The Star Soul Sword was restrained, unable to advance even an inch. Powerless Phoenix, what else can you do? Within the gray fog, the 7th Netherworld emissary spoke softly. Iron chains extended from his body and locked onto the person in front of him. With the iron chain on his body, knowing destiny advanced instead of retreating, he grabbed the iron chain and fell from the sky like a meteor. 4 symbols Divine Seal, Azure Dragon Descent. The 4 symbols Divine Seal appeared again. The Azure Dragon coiled around the two and fell from the sky. In the next moment, an earth-shattering collision sounded from the ground. The ground cracked open, and dust rose into the air. The terrifying scene caused the expressions of the other 12 Netherworld envoys to sink. After a while, the dust settled. Blood spread across the cracked ground, and the iron chains broke apart, scattering everywhere. The black coffin opened, and Ningchen pulled Luofei out. With a wave of his hand, a palm-sized azure boat appeared. It instantly turned into a normal-sized azure boat. It carried Luofei and the ghostly girl in the ice coffin and turned into a beam of light. The expressions of the 12 Netherworld envoys changed. 6 of them quickly chased after the azure boat. None of you can pass, Ningchen said tiredly. The Star Soul in his hand shone brightly, and a brilliant blood-red light cut through the void, separating life and death. The 6 Netherworld envoys blocked the sword light. When they focused again, the azure boat had already disappeared. The final mission was completed. Ningchen, who was already at the end of his rope, no longer had any worries. He stepped forward and stood on the ghost phoenix. Immediately, he turned into a black beam of light and charged towards the Netherworld Hall's envoys. Seeing that Ningchen was going all out, the 12 Netherworld envoys extended their chains once again. They intertwined into an inescapable net that enveloped the ghost phoenix. With a loud boom, the iron chains were sent flying. The 12 Netherworld envoys retreated a few steps from the terrifying shockwaves. The chains in their hands were all broken. On the other side, the ghost phoenix was heavily injured. The war chariot's artifact spirit had exhausted its energy and was once again in a deep sleep. The bronze war chariot, which had regained its original appearance, became abnormally dim. The array patterns on the chariot retracted, and there was no longer any trace of aura. At the Sword Edge encampment, fresh blood flowed. Ningchen stabilized himself and looked at the 12 Netherworld Hall's envoys in front of him. His tired eyes flashed with regret. It was a pity that he couldn't bring them down with him. Eternal banishment. He left the last move for himself. Ningchen waved his sword and opened up the void. The endless void continued to extend and swallow his body. He couldn't die yet. Then he would fall into the void forever. He would leave the rest to them. You can't leave. At this moment, the 7th Netherworld envoy, who had been severely injured earlier, rushed forward. The gray fog around him spread and turned into chains once again, locking onto the red-robed man in the void. Ningchen. At this moment, a petite figure rushed over from afar. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. Without hesitation, she rushed into the void. Is another one here to die? The 7th Netherworld envoy snorted. Another chain extended from his hand and locked onto the little girl in the void. When Ningchen saw this, his eyes shrank. He took a step forward and blocked the attack. Ah! With a groan, the iron chain pierced through his body. Ningchen turned around and grabbed the iron chain that had pierced through his body. His expression was unprecedentedly stern. He shouted angrily, "Who allowed you to come back? If you don't leave, I won't leave either." Her grabbed onto Ningchen tightly. Her eyes were filled with tears. In the void, the iron chain retracted. Blood splattered everywhere. The two of them were forcefully pulled out from the shattered void. Ningchen waved his sword and broke the iron chain. Blood dripped from his mouth, dyeing his clothes red again and again. You shouldn't have come back. Ningchen could not bear to reprimand her. He looked at the little girl behind him and sighed. He was even more worried. Heavens, for the past 30 years, you have never protected knowing destiny. Knowing destiny's sinful body, I am willing to fall into the abyss. However, I am innocent. Ningchen could no longer retreat. Blood flowed from his eyes. He looked up at the heavens and prayed. His phoenix blood flowed in reverse, and his blood essence soared into the sky. The 9 heavens sensed it, and lightning struck. Bolts of lightning pierced into Ningchen's body. At that moment, an unprecedentedly violent aura spread. The forbidden domain borrowed life from the heavens. The moment the lightning pierced his body, Ningchen's blood mist surged. His strength exceeded his limits, and his foundation was destroyed. Follow me. I will bring you out of this. Blood dripped down, and a beautiful scene bloomed. Ningchen pulled the little girl and rushed forward. In front of them, 13 netherworld envoys were blocking their way. Between life and death, they did not allow anyone to escape. Iron chains crisscrossed, and gray mist curled around them. Ningchen waved his sword and broke the chains. Lightning surged around his body, and every moment, blood spurted out. In the final confrontation, weapons clashed. Flames soared into the sky, and the ground sank down hundreds of feet. The white snowy ground was dyed red by blood. The brilliance on the sword, thunder roared, powerful to the extreme, hacking apart chain after chain. Don't let him escape. He won't last long. The 7th netherworld envoy shouted coldly. Gray aura surged around him, and chains rushed out. They were like an inescapable net that blocked the path ahead. The sword light broke through the net. Blood flowed from Ningchen's eyes, and the bloody light from the astral soul in his hand became brighter and brighter. With a slash of his sword, the chains broke and scattered into the sky. The promise of the past was still fresh in his mind, and he could not forget it. Ningchen leaned to the side and avoided one of the chains. He immediately cut it with his sword and took a few steps forward. In the sky, countless bolts of lightning struck. Under the night sky, the blood-red, unyielding spirit continued to advance. It borrowed life from the heavens to protect the little girl behind it. The sword light broke through the night sky, and the few of them survived. In the north, the girl in green hurriedly rushed towards the battlefield. They were hundreds of miles away, but now it seemed like they were at the end of the world. They did not expect that Yin would disappear while they were treating Xia Zi's injuries. They also did not expect that the aura of the Hall of the Dead would appear in the distant battlefield. In front of the boundary stone in the far north, the red-robed knowing destiny used the last bit of strength he borrowed from the heavens to advance. Under the sword light, several netherworld envoys were dyed red. Their perfect teamwork finally showed a flaw. Nirvana! With the last bit of strength and the help of lightning, hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of blood-red sword lights gathered. They crisscrossed and were magnificent. The only sword at the peak carried the last bit of strength and broke through the night sky, rushing forward. Ah! In the intense collision, groans sounded. The 4 netherworld envoys retreated at the same time, their mouths red. Let's go! Ningchen pulled in and rushed out of the encirclement. Chase! The 9 netherworld envoys reacted and immediately chased after them. The other 4 netherworld envoys also suppressed their injuries and followed. Under the night sky, the blood-red figures were extremely fast. The big hand that was holding In-Er's hand no longer had any blood. The phoenix blood had dried up in the cold wind, and it was so cold. In-Er, remember to find Xia Zi after you escape. He will protect you. Remember, in this world, apart from him, don't trust anyone else easily. Ningchen could feel the life in his body fading. He continued to move forward as he tiredly reminded In, I want to follow you. If we die together. In's eyes were filled with tears. She hugged Ningchen's hand and refused to let go. Listen to me. I can't hold on any longer. Don't come back. Otherwise, I won't recognize you anymore. As he spoke, Ningchen flipped his palm and sent you out. He stopped his body, which could no longer move. Looking at the 13 figures rushing towards him, a look of regret flashed past his eyes. In the next moment, streaks of lightning exploded from his body. The phoenix's body dissipated, and the ownerless phoenix origin carried the last of knowing destiny's life. It turned into a huge phoenix illusion and rushed into the 9 heavens. Lock it down. Seeing this, the 13 netherworld envoys' expressions darkened. They worked together to release the chains, which swept towards the phoenix illusion in the sky. Boom! At this moment, above the 9 heavens, a huge demonic figure appeared. It was more than 1,000 feet tall. It stepped on the lightning and descended to the mortal realm. Chapter 662. In the extreme north, the phoenix's body dissipated, and the phoenix origin turned into a phoenix shadow that rushed into the 9 heavens, taking away everything that belonged to the knowing destiny state. In the void, the chains around the 13 netherworld envoys extended as they rushed towards the phoenix origin. Suddenly, in the 9 heavens, thunder rumbled, and a huge demonic figure descended from the sky. The demonic figure stood tall, and with 1 foot, it crushed thousands of lightning bolts as it descended. In an instant, dozens of chains broke and scattered in the sky, falling like rain. The demonic body descended and looked at the phoenix origin sealed in the phoenix body. An indescribable light flashed in its eyes. The knowing destiny state could not die. Even if it had to suffer the pain of being sealed, it could not die. The phoenix body's final actions had given it a chance to live. You have done well. Leave the rest to me. The demonic body raised its hand, and demonic aura surged, slowly devouring the phoenix origin and the sealed heavenly soul. Otherworldly demon. The 13 netherworld envoys looked at the huge demonic body descending from the sky, and their expressions froze. Weren't the otherworldly demons all buried by the Queen Mother of the West in ancient times? All of you, go to hell together. With that, the demonic body moved and punched out. Rumbling sounds could be heard, and the void around them collapsed. The demonic body's aura was frightening and shocking. The 13 netherworld envoys' expressions changed slightly, and the chains intertwined as they worked together to block the demonic aura. The huge fist landed, and with a loud bang, the 13 netherworld envoys all took a step back. The intertwining chains broke continuously, unable to withstand the demonic aura. Open the coffins! Seeing this, the first netherworld envoy's eyes darkened as he shouted, "Open the coffins!" The 9 netherworld envoys shouted at the same time, and the coffins opened one by one. Suddenly, cold aura surrounded them. In the next moment, terrifying auras were awakened, as if evil spirits from hell had come to the world, causing everyone to tremble uncontrollably. The coffins opened, and 9 corpse gods that were shining with green light appeared. Their figures flashed, and in an instant, they were in front of the demonic body. Their fists were filled with boundless death aura. When they were alive, they were brave and good at fighting. After they died, they were refined into corpse gods. Their lifeless faces were emotionless, and they had no consciousness. Only the death aura around them. It was so powerful that it made one's heart palpitate. Pathetic! The demonic body snorted coldly as it shook its arms, shattering the chains binding it. Then, it threw a punch straight at the corpse god. The sky shook violently, and the demonic energy and death energy surged. Boundless residual energy roared and surged, and the surrounding void collapsed. In this world-shaking battle, Feng Qi filled the sky with flames of war. 6 ultimates of the sky demon, 1,000 gods burial. With a deep roar, demonic energy overflowed into the heavens. The giant fist punched out, and the world within 100 miles collapsed, swallowing everything in its path. The phoenix body scattered. The enraged demon cultivator unleashed the heavenly demon secret technique, a demon race divine ability from Xian Luo's memories. It carried the demon cultivator's innate talent to the greatest extent, burying gods with 1 punch and wailing the 9 heavens. The heavenly devil devoured the gods. The 9 corpse gods bore the brunt of the attack, and 4 of them collapsed on the spot. Blood and bones scattered down like rain. The 13 netherworld envoys joined forces to block the attack, but it was still difficult for them to fend off the destructive demonic aura. They retreated several steps, and the corners of their mouths were dyed red. In the aftermath, specks of starlight flickered, and the remnant souls that were bound within the corpse god were freed. For men and women with ancient auras walked out and respectfully bowed to the demon in front of them. Then they gradually dissipated between heaven and earth. Many thanks. The last voice was one that didn't want to be enslaved. The souls of the dead scattered and returned to the cycle of reincarnation. Be careful, it's a royal demon. After the aftermath dissipated, the leader of the 13 Netherworld envoys reminded them with an extremely serious expression. The 6 ultimate techniques of the heavenly demon were a divine ability that only heavenly demons of the royal demon race and above could cultivate. Ordinary demons didn't have this ability at all. The 12 Netherworld envoys nodded, and their expressions turned serious. They half knelt down, and grayish-black fog surrounded their bodies. The Hall of the Dead's forbidden technique appeared in the mortal world for the first time. God of the Dead. Using blood as a sacrifice to summon the gods, the blood around the 13 Netherworld envoys started to gather towards the sky. In the next moment, dark clouds started to gather in the sky above the 9 heavens. A figure that was also 1,000 feet tall appeared. The Netherworld aura around it started to spread rapidly. The Yama King of the Underworld, the god of the Hall of the Dead. He was an existence that was on par with the primordial age. Now, he appeared in the mortal world, and his violent murderous intent shook the 9 heavens and 10 earths. God! Seeing the former's huge body, a mocking look flashed across the demon cultivator's eyes. He said, "A mere alien dares to call himself a god? Who gave you the guts?" 6 ultimates of the sky demon, 10,000 demons howl to the heavens. The 2 fists collided. Demonic waves rushed into the sky. Demonic figures appeared one after another, numbering in the tens of thousands. They floated up and down in the horizon. This world-shocking move made the 9 heavens tremble. Otherworldly demon, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The god of the underworld spoke. His chi surged and condensed into 100-meter-long scythe. The Grim Reaper's scythe slashed out, and demonic shadows scattered. The aura of death was constantly devouring mana. Myriad demons devour the heavens. The demonic cultivator's expression turned cold. He shouted, and the power of 10,000 demons gathered. The demonic clouds rolled, and a huge hole appeared, swallowing the god of the underworld below. Why do demons devour the heavens? The god of the underworld snorted and waved his black sickle. The demonic clouds within 1,000 miles shook violently and showed signs of dissipating. Boom! The moment the god of the underworld blocked the attack, the demon cultivator moved and punched out. The battle between the gods and demons shook the heavens and the earth. Tyrannical power spread out for hundreds of li. In the world of ice and snow, glaciers exploded one after another, unable to withstand the terrifying shockwaves. This is 9th junior brother. 100 miles away, Lulua stopped and looked at the familiar face in the air with shock. Something's wrong. Lulua scanned with her divine sense and didn't see. Her expression sank and she shouted, "9th junior brother, where is Een? Didn't she come back to find you?" In the air, the demon cultivator turned around and looked at the figure in the distance. There were no ripples in his deep, dark eyes. A moment later, his demonic sense spread out to search for the aura left on the little girl. "Who are you?" The demon cultivator found the little girl squatting on the ground and crying hundreds of li away. He looked at the person in the distance and asked. The phoenix body had sealed its cauldron soul and its memories. He didn't know what had happened during this time. Lulua. Lulua's eyes narrowed when she heard that. Being distracted in battle. Should I say that you're confident or stupid? In an instant, the god of the underworld appeared in front of the demon cultivator. The giant sickle in his hands silently slashed out. With a clang, the demon cultivator grabbed the sickle. Drops of blood dripped down. He looked coldly at the fake god in front of him and said coldly, "It's enough to kill you." He punched out again. Demonic waves surged and its power could split the sky. Demon who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How much longer can you be arrogant? The god of the underworld blocked the punch with his palm. Violent demonic chi shook, and the battle immediately separated. Is 600 li northwest of you. Take her away. The demon cultivator transmitted his voice. His figure flashed and his legs swept out. The air cracked and the sea split. The explosion was ear-piercing. The god of the underworld blocked the demonic chi with his fist. He shook violently and retreated several steps. 100 li away, Lulua heard that and didn't stop. She took a step and rushed toward the northwest wind. I'll wait for you ahead with you. You must come back alive. After saying that, Lulua disappeared into the night. The battle in the sky became more and more intense. Punches and kicks swept across, and the power to split the sky destroyed pieces of heaven and earth. The collapsed space didn't have time to recover before it was split open again. The battle between the god and the demon cultivator from the ancient times reappeared. The demon cultivator's body was hundreds of meters tall. He faced the god of death's sickle head-on. Punches and kicks collided, and blood splattered everywhere. The blood-stained god's moves became more and more ruthless. The blood-stained demon cultivator's madness became more and more difficult to control. 6 ultimates of the sky demon, demonic flames burning the plains. The demon race's mystical ability appeared again. Smoke billowed for 100 li, and the demonic waves ignited 1,000 layers of fire waves. The sky shattered with a punch. The demonic flames arrived, and the flames of war filled the sky. The god of the underworld didn't dare to be careless. The death scythe in his hand condensed the yin chi around him. There was an earth-shattering collision. Blood stained the sky, and the yin chi dissipated. The god of the underworld retreated several steps, and the corners of his mouth were dyed red. Below, the 13 netherworld envoys who had sacrificed their god with blood were also injured. They all vomited blood. The human body couldn't withstand the power of a foreign race descending. Under the boundless demonic chi, the god of the underworld showed signs of defeat. How dare you call yourself a god when you're so capable? What a joke! As he spoke, the demon cultivator rushed forward and punched through the god of the underworld's body. The god of the underworld groaned. His consciousness that had descended to the human world collapsed along with his physical body. He couldn't hold on anymore. Sky demons, a sad race. This human world can't tolerate you. It was like this in the ancient times, and it's the same today. Amidst his maniacal laughter, the god of the underworld's physical body collapsed. His consciousness that had descended to the human world dissipated, and he returned to his own world. Below, as the god of the underworld disappeared, the 13 netherworld envoys stumbled once again. They vomited blood. In this life and death crisis, the leader of the 13 netherworld envoys was shocked. He looked at the sky and shouted in fear, "Palace Master, save us!" As soon as he said that, the heavens and earth stilled. An instant later, the wind and clouds stirred. An unprecedented power appeared. It passed through the barriers of space and refined the wind and clouds. It condensed into a giant hand and slammed down. True realm martial artist. The demon cultivator's eyes narrowed. Demonic flames rose into the sky and crashed into the giant hand in the sky. With a loud explosion, the heavens and earth became chaotic. The aftershock spread, and the demon cultivator took 3 steps back. He fell down with a smear of blood at the corner of his mouth. In the sky, the giant hand formed by the wind and clouds was hit by the demonic might. It shattered bit by bit and dissipated. The demon cultivator chuckled inexplicably. The strong power dissipated, and the dark clouds dispersed. The moon in the sky shone down coldly once again. Now it's your turn. The strange power disappeared, and the demon cultivator looked at the 13 netherworld envoys in front of him. He did not hide the killing intent in his eyes. He took a step forward, and demonic chi surged out, swallowing everything around him. Under the cold moon in the sky, the demon cultivator could no longer see any light. After a while, the demon cultivator walked out. The demonic chi retracted, and the 13 netherworld envoys disappeared. A cold wind blew past, and the demon cultivator gradually retracted. The black-robed, black-haired demon cultivator reappeared and walked toward the north. In the Phoenix origin, the ghost lady's ice coffin was nowhere to be seen. The Phoenix cultivator must have sent her away before sealing himself. The demon cultivator looked at the world of ice and snow below him. He released his divine sense and searched for traces of the ice coffin. An unknown distance away, a small green boat sailed past. In the boat, an ice coffin made of ice and snow was very eye-catching. In the ice coffin, a beautiful woman was sleeping quietly. 100 years, 1,000 years, she had no regrets. Behind her, the demon cultivator quickly passed by. He stopped and released his divine sense. Then he continued forward. For 30 years, the demon cultivator did not receive any pity from the heavens. Every step he took, he faced thousands of disasters. The Phoenix cultivator had no regrets, and the demon cultivator had no fear. Step by step, he flattened all disasters. Chapter 663. In a world of ice and snow, it was a long night. The cold moon shone in the sky, and it was bone-chilling. Everything was snowy white, and it was extremely dazzling. The extreme north was extremely cold, and the snow did not melt for thousands of years. The demonic cultivator's figure flashed past, and in an instant, he disappeared into the world of ice and snow. In front of him, the azure boat flew past quickly. It was not affected by the wind and snow, and it was getting faster and faster. Before they parted, the Phoenix body sent the ghost girl away with the azure boat. It was waiting for them to meet again when they returned. The vast land of ice and snow was unimaginably vast. The demonic cultivator did not dare to stop for even a moment. He continued to chase after the azure boat, using the Phoenix origin left behind by the azure boat. The cold wind blew up waves of snow, and when they hit the demonic cultivator, it was extremely cold. The Tao body had lived for 100 years, while the demonic cultivator had lived for 1,000 years. The Phoenix body was on the verge of death, but the demonic cultivator did not have time to care about it. He hurriedly chased after the azure boat in the distance. At the end of the extreme north, the world was completely frozen. The temperature was terrifyingly low, and the snow turned into hail that fell from the sky. In the most extreme weather, there was no trace of life within 1,000 miles. It was an absolute land of death, and all living things that entered were buried. The azure boat was covered in ice crystals, and it was like a lone boat that was traveling in the land of ice and snow like a statue. It was the only scenery in the world. Not long after, the demonic cultivator arrived. In the extreme cold, the demonic cultivator's cultivation technique was getting more and more restricted. In order to prevent the azure boat from falling into the hands of others, the Phoenix body sent it to this terrifying land of extreme cold, but it also brought great trouble to the demonic cultivator. In the frozen world, the void was stagnant, and it was difficult to move. Only the azure boat, which was originally an inanimate object, did not slow down at all. Chasing after the Phoenix origin aura on the azure boat, the demonic cultivator released his divine sense and focused his attention, afraid that he would lose track of the azure boat. Found it. Between the glaciers formed by the 1,000-year-old ice, the demonic cultivator narrowed his eyes and looked at the azure light in front of him. He stepped forward and his speed increased. In the next moment, the azure boat flew past and crashed into a mountain. Rumbling sounds of avalanches could be heard, and large chunks of ice and snow poured down from high places. The shocking heavenly might was like the end of the world, and no one could resist it. Under the mountain, the azure boat was blocked, and it was about to be buried in the disaster. At this moment, the demon cultivator let out a deep roar. In the blink of an eye, his body was 100 feet tall, and he used the heavenly demon divine power again. Using his body to shake the natural disaster, his demonic body bore the might of the heavens and protected the azure boat behind him. The path ahead appeared, and the azure boat crossed the shore. Just as they were about to leave, the demonic aura around the demonic cultivator rapidly spread out and engulfed the azure boat. Drink! With a shout, the demon body took a step back. The avalanche that the demon body bore crashed down, engulfing everything in front of it. Not long after, 100 miles away, the demonic body appeared. His divine sense swept over the blue boat, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Buffet? Wasn't she with Xiazi? How did she end up like this? Within the blue boat, beside the ice coffin, Luofei was sleeping. Her vitality was so weak that it was almost undetectable. The demon body condensed its essence and the Tina Phoenix's source energy poured into the former's body, stabilizing what little life force it had left. After a while, the demonic body stopped attacking. His figure flashed and headed in the direction where had been. If he had guessed correctly, Xiazi was most likely with Lua. Why hadn't he attacked? Was he injured, or did something happen? Thousands of miles away, snow was everywhere, and visibility was less than 100 feet. Was squatting on the ground. Her big eyes were filled with tears as she cried softly. Her trembling body seemed so delicate in the cold wind. He's fine. Don't cry. Lua's heart ached as she watched from the side. Lua was squatting on the ground, wiping away her tears. She didn't say a word. She knew that if something happened to the phoenix body, Ning Chen's other two bodies wouldn't be able to return. Lulua sighed softly. Her 9th junior brother had experienced too many hardships. Must have suffered a lot by his side. Wasn't it too cruel to let a child go through all this? Don't cry. At this moment, a black-clothed, black-haired figure walked over in the snow. Her raised her head and saw a familiar figure. She got up and ran over, hugging the figure and crying. All right, it's fine now. The demonic body patted the little girl's head and calmly said, Are you 9th junior brother? Lulua looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar youth in front of her. 4th senior sister, it's nice to meet you. The demonic body looked at the woman beside him. Incarnation? That's not right. Lulua narrowed her eyes. This was different from Mo Zhu's incarnation technique. 4th senior sister, there's no need to guess. I'll explain later. Let's leave this place first, said Ningchen calmly. Okay. Lulua nodded. Follow me. After saying this, Lulua took a step forward and headed east. The demonic body pulled and quickly followed. How's the phoenix body? Wiped away her tears and sobbed. The phoenix body chose to seal itself and protect the Selim soul. However, its physical body has already scattered. It's very troublesome, said the demonic body gravely. Can it still recover? Asked nervously. If the Selim soul wakes up, perhaps there's still hope. I'll take care of this matter. Tell me what happened these past few days. I can't see the Selim soul's memories for now. Nodded slightly and wiped away her tears. She told the demonic body everything that had happened after they had separated. Hearing that Mo Zhu had taken action, the demonic body's eyes shone with a cold light. As expected, the problem was him. However, the phoenix body and Xiazi working together were still unable to block a single incarnation. Just how powerful was that old fellow? Also told the rest of the story. When she reached the part where the phoenix body had borrowed its life to protect itself, tears began to flow out of her eyes again. The demonic body nodded. He now had a general understanding of what had happened. Without a doubt, Purple Marquis was a problem. The phoenix body's accident was largely due to his impulsiveness, which had led to them being discovered by the Jin Shi imperial family. As for Luo, she truly was an extremely calm person. However, calm people were always cruel. They could be trusted, but they couldn't be completely trusted. In addition, Xiazi's situation was also strange. There was only one person in the world who had the 12 wings of sin. However, hadn't he been sent back in that battle? How could he still have the strength to remain in the human world? As they were thinking, the three of them arrived in front of a snow valley. The surrounding cliffs blocked the wind, making the weather much calmer. Purple Marquis was pacing back and forth in front of the snow valley. He couldn't conceal his impatience. When the three of them appeared, Purple Marquis was startled. He didn't notice the demonic body's aura and robes change. He hastily walked over and asked, 9th junior apprentice brother, are you all right? I'm fine. Where's Xiazi? Asked Ningchen indifferently. He's still in the valley. He hasn't woken up yet, replied Purple Marquis. Many thanks. Ningchen calmly said. He didn't say anything else and walked into the valley. The instant they passed each other, his cold and emotionless gaze was completely different from before. Only then did Purple Marquis notice it. Looking back, he was startled. What was going on? Don't ask too much for now. Let's follow him and take a look. Lulua's expression was grave as she instructed. Soon after, she also walked towards the valley. Purple Marquis nodded and suppressed his questions. Just now, he had clearly sensed an aura similar to Xiazi's from his 9th junior apprentice brother. Demonic Qi. Within the valley, the black-robed, white-haired sovereign was lying on a rock. His aura was extremely weak. He had clearly suffered a backlash from using a forbidden technique. Ningchen walked over and took in origin energy with a flip of his palm. Demonic waves surged around him and poured into the former's body. Behind him, Purple Marquis's pupils shrank. After a quarter of an hour, Ningchen stopped and looked at the sovereign in front of him. The valley was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. No one said a word. On the rock, the sovereign opened his eyes. The demonic Qi instinctively attacked the person in front of him. With a bang, the two demonic Qi collided. Boundless demonic Qi surged and swept up 1,000 layers of snow. Xiazi, I trust you've been well since we last met, said Ningchen coldly. Xiazi's eyes regained their clarity. He looked at the demonic body in front of him and narrowed his eyes. So this is your demonic body. Knowing Marquis, I didn't expect someone as rational as you would be forced to this step. At least a demonic Qi can do as he pleases, right, my friend? Said Ningchen coldly. Where's the phoenix body? Why didn't he come back with you? Asked Xiazi. He won't be coming back for a while. Ningchen waved his hand and a blue boat appeared. Luofei flew out and landed in front of him. I'll leave Luofei to you. Back then she protected your life. Now it's your turn to wait for her to wake up, said Ningchen. Xiazi looked at the woman in front of him and unconsciously trembled. He raised his hand and demonic Qi spread out, swallowing her. Many thanks, said Xiazi. There's no need for thanks. Xiazi, this is the only time. Next time, if something happens to Luofei and you're still alive, don't blame me for being ruthless. You can't stay here any longer. Take advantage of the fact that the Jin Shi royal family's troops haven't arrived yet and leave with Luofei, said Ningchen. Goodbye. The sovereign nodded and didn't stay any longer. He walked out of the valley. Purple Marquis was about to speak when Lulua glared at him. After Xiazi left, Purple Marquis couldn't help but ask, 9th junior apprentice brother, why didn't you keep him here? One more person is one more force. Ningchen turned his head and looked at Zichuan. 7th senior apprentice brother, I've already lost my life. I don't want to lose my last friend. Senior apprentice brother should be aware of Master Mo's strength. How much of an effect do you think one more person will have? Purple Marquis's expression froze. After a long time, he sighed and didn't say anything else. Ningchen's gaze shifted to Lulua, who was deep in thought. He asked, 4th senior apprentice sister, I want to know when eldest senior apprentice brother will appear. So, Lulua recovered. Since eldest senior apprentice brother has interfered, Master Mo definitely won't let this matter rest. I think that it won't be long before we have to face that old fellow. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Ningchen calmly replied. The matter of Mo Gate had to be resolved as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would always be like a fishbone stuck in his throat. Chapter 664. In the snowy valley in the far north, the four left. The cold wind blew, and the scene was dazzling. In the sacred palace of the Jinsi dynasty, Sovereign Lord Jinsi stood on the dragon throne, looking into the distance. Light flashed in his eyes. Sovereign Lord Jinsi. As he spoke, the void rolled, and a shadow shrouded in black mist appeared. A powerful aura surged, and the entire palace shook. Palace Lord. Sovereign Lord Jinsi said slowly. Wrong, it's the acting Palace Lord. The person said calmly. Sovereign Lord Jinsi narrowed his eyes and did not linger on this topic. He said, May I know why the acting Palace Lord has come? I want to know the identity of the person who fought with the 13 underworld envoys, the acting Palace Lord said in the black mist. The 9th son of Mo clan, Sovereign Lord Jinsi said honestly. Oh. The acting palace lord was slightly surprised. Mo clan's disciple? He's only ranked 9th, but he's so capable. Heroes come from the young. Acting palace lord, I've given you such a good furnace. Shouldn't you raise the price? Sovereign Lord Jinsi said calmly. Whether this person is worth that much or not, we'll have to wait until we catch him, the acting palace lord said, unmoved. It seems that the Hall of the Underworld has failed this time, Sovereign Lord Jinsi said without any surprise. There were some accidents. I'll send people again. I hope that the Hall of the Underworld and the Jinsi dynasty can cooperate happily this time, the acting palace lord said. Of course. Sovereign Lord Jinsi replied. Report. At this moment, outside the palace, a clear voice sounded. His Highness Dong Wang has arrived. In the large hall, a ray of light flashed across the eyes of the acting hallmaster of the Nether Hall when he heard this. Immediately, his figure gradually faded and disappeared. In front of the dragon throne, Sovereign Lord Jinsi frowned slightly. Why did Dong Wang come here at this time? Not long after, outside the palace, a woman in a light blue battle dress stepped in. Her beautiful face was flawless. She was the leader of the 4 kings of the Jinsi dynasty, and she returned for the first time in 10 years. Your Highness. Dong Wang bowed but did not kneel. There's no need to be so courteous. What brings you here today, Dong Wang? Sovereign Jean, she asked calmly. I came back to ask your majesty whether or not Mo Gate's 9th son must be killed, said the East King calmly. Oh. Emperor Jean, she narrowed his eyes and asked, what do you mean, East King? I've returned to the battlefield to take a look. From the traces left behind, the 13 patrollers of the Hall of the Dead were clearly defeated. Wouldn't such experts be more valuable than anything else in the Jinsi dynasty? Dong Wang said seriously. He's the murderer of the North King. Has the East King forgotten about that? Asked Sovereign Jean she coldly. He might not be the one who killed the North King. Even if it was him, what can he do? The North King attacked first. If he died, he could only blame himself for being too weak. Moreover, how could such a brave swordsman lose to the North King? The East King replied. Does East King mean that you insist on protecting this person? Sovereign Jean, she's expression grew colder. I wouldn't dare. However, if the Hall of the Dead can't take him, I'm willing to subdue him and make him work for the Jinsi dynasty, said the East King calmly. You don't have to care about this anymore. Leave, said Sovereign Jean she coldly. The East King did not move. He looked at the Emperor in the hall, showing no intention of leaving. Seeing this, Sovereign Jean she's expression became extremely gloomy. He said coldly, East King, are you going to defy the decree? I wouldn't dare, said the East King calmly. Dong Wang said calmly and continued, what I said today is all for the sake of the Jinsi dynasty. I hope that the Emperor can reconsider. Sovereign Jean, she clenched his fists so hard that they cracked. After a while, he suppressed the anger in his heart and said, if you insist on protecting this person, how will you deal with Mo Gate and the Hall of the Dead? As long as your majesty agrees, I'm willing to shoulder the pressure from the Hall of the Dead and Mo Gate, said the East King calmly. Sovereign Jean, she stared at the Emperor below. After a long time, he waved his hand and said, you may leave. Thank you, your majesty. The East King bowed respectfully and turned to leave. Looking at the East King's back, the Jinsi dynasty's expression darkened again. The East King was getting more and more presumptuous. However, the East King's strength was unfathomable. It would not be easy to deal with him. It was indeed a big problem. Gold City, a city not far from Yenji City. In a newly purchased mansion, Lulu'a was still tidying up the herbs as usual. Her calm expression was not affected by what had happened these days. Was practicing swordsmanship in the courtyard. When she was tired, she would run to help tidy up the herbs. She was not too sentimental. After all, a little girl's nature was more open-minded than ordinary people. In the eastern courtyard, Ningchen did not go out all day. He was wholeheartedly cultivating the celestial devil race's secret arts. The phoenix body's mishap was not a small loss. It meant that they had lost a crucial element to deal with Mo Master. This gap might be even larger than they had imagined. He had to do his best to make up for it. Purple Marquis looked at the eastern courtyard, a serious expression flashing through his eyes. The fact that his 9th junior brother was a devil was not ordinary. Their fates were not ordinary. Perhaps they could temporarily put this matter aside, but that did not mean others could. Once his 9th junior brother's identity was discovered, it would be troublesome. There's no need to think too much about it. As long as 9th junior brother can maintain his rationality, he will always be our junior brother. Human and devil are meaningless to us. Lulua took out a drawer of golden apricot flowers and slowly unfolded them. Your 4th senior sister is right. Race and identity are not things we should consider. As she spoke, scarlet flames rose. An extremely powerful figure walked out. His scarlet armor was dazzling. Even from dozens of meters away, they could feel a heavy pressure. Eldest senior brother. Purple Marquis' expression shook when he saw who it was. You're back. Lulua raised her head. Xiang Yuan nodded and looked towards the courtyard in the east, saying, that must be 9th junior brother. Such a strong and dense devil chi is truly astonishing. If eldest senior brother had seen 9th junior brother's sword cultivation, you would be even more shocked, said Lulua calmly. Oh! Xiang Yuan's expression changed. Just as he was about to speak, his expression suddenly sank. Looking at the eastern horizon, his gaze focused. A corporeal realm expert. To the side, Lulua and Purple Marquis also sensed the pressure coming from the eastern horizon. Their expressions also became grave. How could it be so fast? It really wasn't easy to find you. At this moment, clouds surged in the eastern horizon and a light blue figure walked out. She slowly landed in the courtyard and looked to the east. 9th disciple of Mo Gate, come out. In the eastern courtyard, Ningchen opened his eyes. Devil Yuan revolved around his body. A moment later, he withdrew his aura and walked to the side of the courtyard. Chapter 665. The Eastern King had arrived in Gilded City. His powerful aura filled the entire courtyard, causing clouds and mist to swirl around him. He was the head of Jin Shi's 4 kings, a late corporeal realm expert. As soon as he appeared, he gave off an indescribably terrifying pressure. Eastern King. Xiang Yuan's expression turned serious. Xiang Yuan Lu. Dong Wang's gaze swept across the two of them, before turning towards Purple Marquis and saying, then you should be Zichuan. Although your appearance has changed quite a bit, you're the only corporeal realm disciples among Master Mo's disciples. Purple Marquis tightened his grip on his sword, his brows furrowed in caution. Eastern King, why have you personally come? Lulua put down the medicinal herbs in her hands and calmly stood up. I've come to take Mo Gate's 9th son away. The Eastern King looked to the east. Lulua narrowed her eyes. Eastern King, is it Emperor Jin Shi's idea to take 9th junior brother away, or is it your own idea? Is there a difference? However, I can guarantee you that once he leaves with me, the matter with the Northern King will be resolved. No one will be able to do anything to him. Eastern King really is bold. If Emperor Jin Shi or the Nether Hall were to take action against 9th junior brother, would you be able to stop them? If you offend your superiors, how would you deal with that? Lulua calmly asked. Since I dared to say this, I'm confident I can do it. As for the Emperor, there's no need for you to worry about him. I'll explain myself. Many thanks for your favor, Eastern King. However, I still have many things to do. I don't have this fortune. At this moment, a black-clothed, black-haired figure walked over from the eastern courtyard. Beside Lu, immediately ran over and hugged his hand when she saw him come out. The Dong King glanced over, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Your celestial devil body was actually able to fool Mo Zhu's eyes. You really are impressive. 9th disciple of Mo Gate, you should think this through carefully. Between the two of us, we are either friends or enemies. There is no third choice. If you refuse today, then when we meet again on the battlefield, I will no longer hold back. Sorry. Ningchen refused once more. That's truly a pity. Dong Wang sighed regretfully. Without saying anything more, he turned around and left. It was a pity that such an expert could not be taken in as a subordinate. The clouds surged and the king left. He did not insist, but he was filled with regret. The choice of one's position was never up to him. The next time they met, there would be no appreciation, only a merciless slaughter. Jinsi East King, it's amazing that your cultivation has reached such a level, Xiang Yuan said softly as he watched Jinsi East King leave. That's not a good thing. It means that when we meet again in the future, we'll likely be facing another powerful enemy, said Luluo gravely. That old man has been working with Sovereign Jin Shi for a long time. This is indeed quite troublesome. Xiang Yuan nodded, and a wisp of brilliance flashed through his eyes as he said, however, there are no eternal enemies, nor are there eternal friends. Perhaps we can make use of this as well. Let's leave first. Since the East King was able to find this place, Sovereign Lord Jin Shi should be able to do the same. Ningchen spoke and pulled Iner outside. Lulo nodded. She put away the medicinal herbs that she had yet to open and prepared to leave. Xiang Yuan looked at Luluo and said, I'm going to take care of something. You can leave first. I'll meet up with you soon. Luluo's eyes narrowed slightly. Be careful. Don't worry. After saying that, Xiang Yuan took a step forward and disappeared into the void. Luluo finished putting away the medicinal herbs and glanced at Zichuan. Let's go. Purple Marquis nodded and followed her. Ningchen, where are we going? Asked Iner on the way. We're leaving Jinsi Star. Since Dong Wang was able to find us so quickly, it's pointless for us to go anywhere else. Leaving this star is the most important thing. As for after we leave, Ning Chen's eyes flashed. We're going to Xiaoya Chong, and to find Pavilion Master Xiaoya. You're going to find that black-hearted merchant? Iner was astonished. Why do you want to find him? If something happens to the phoenix body, my strength will be greatly affected. Without the restriction of my extreme speed, it'll be quite a hidden danger when dealing with Master Mo in the future. If possible, I want the phoenix body to recover as soon as possible, said Ningchen. That black-hearted merchant has a way? Asked Yu. I don't know. Ningchen shook his head and said, however, this person was able to tell that I was a demon back then. He must have an ability that ordinary people can't compare to. Besides, in the human realm beyond heaven, very few people know about the Heavenly Book martial arts. This person named the 10 guest rooms after the Heavenly Book martial arts. It's really strange. Perhaps we can get some answers from him. Will he tell us? Asked Iner worriedly. Merchants pursue profit. If he really knows a way, we'll have to see if we can pay the price he wants, said Ningchen calmly. While they were talking, Luluo and Zichuan caught up from behind. The four of them left Jinsi Star together. Outside Jinsi Star, Ningchen looked at the two of them and said, 4th senior sister, 7th senior brother, I'm going to leave to find a way to recover the phoenix body. I'll meet up with you in the future. Lulo nodded. You know all 4 bases. Come back early and be careful. Ningchen responded softly. He didn't stay any longer and left with Iner. 9 days later, Jinsi City, Ningchen and Ting appeared on the Red Lawn Star. In the city, there were still people coming and going in front of the Xiaoya Chong and restaurant. The frighteningly high price didn't stop the enthusiasm of the influential people in the city. Ningchen walked towards the restaurant. He didn't notice that the name of this star was the same as the ancient star in the depths of the star domain. It seemed like it wasn't a coincidence that the Xiaoya Chong and restaurant was built here. Esteemed guests have arrived. Hongwan, go and welcome them. The Xiaoya Chong and restaurant on the 2nd floor said calmly. Yes. Hongwan respectfully bowed and walked downstairs. In front of the Xiaoya Chong and restaurant, Hongwan looked at the 2 people walking over. A strange expression flashed across her beautiful face. It was them. Sister Hongwan. Seeing the figures in front of the restaurant, Iner's delicate face revealed joy. She let go of her hand and ran over. Hongwan's eyes also revealed a gentle expression. She patted the little girl's head and said, Iner, you've grown taller again. Iner vigorously shook her head and unhappily said, Don't pat my head. I won't grow any taller. Hongwan lightly smiled and looked at the black-clothed young man. Young Master Ning, the restaurant master, is waiting on the 2nd floor. Please. Many thanks. Ning Chen replied and walked towards the second floor. On the second floor, in the restaurant Ming, the Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master had removed her silver-gray cloak and was wearing casual clothes. The sharp aura on her face had also disappeared and she looked no different from an ordinary person. Ning Chen knocked on the door a few times. After hearing the response, he immediately pushed the door open and entered. "Brother Ning, I didn't expect to meet you again so soon." The Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master turned around and revealed a smile. "Restaurant master's elegance hasn't diminished in the slightest," Ning Chen politely said. "Heh." The Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master chuckled and said, "One doesn't visit a temple without a reason. Speak frankly." "I'm here to ask if there's any way to undo the self-sealing of the heavenly soul," Ning Chen seriously said. The Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master slightly frowned and said, "Why do you ask?" "Something happened to my phoenix body and I had no choice but to seal my heavenly soul," Ning Chen replied. "Self-sealing of the divine soul is troublesome." The Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master put down the scissors she was using to cut the flowers and plants and washed her hands. She said, "Forcefully unsealing it will undoubtedly harm your heavenly soul. The gains do not make up for the losses. If there's no need, just maintain the current state. The cultivation technique you cultivate is not ordinary. I believe it won't cause too much of an impact on your body." "Is there really no way?" Ning Chen frowned. "There may be, but I don't know. In terms of the attainments of the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, Master Mo is the best in the world." "Actually, you should ask him," the Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master said honestly. Ning Chen heard this and calmly said, "If I could ask him, I wouldn't have come to ask you." The Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master was slightly surprised and said, "You turned hostile so quickly? I thought I would have to wait for a few more days." "You know that there's a problem with Master Mo." Ning Chen narrowed his eyes and said, "As for what problem Master Mo has, I'm not too sure. However, based on the changes in Mo Gate these past few years, I can deduce a few things. Mo Gate's disciples cultivate too quickly, but they also die too quickly." The Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master thought for a moment and said, "Since you can't ask Master Mo, I have another person in mind. I just don't know if you dare to go." "Who?" asked Ning Chen. "Heaven Speaker," said the Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master. "Her." Ning Chen frowned once more. "Why do you say that?" "According to legends, Heaven Speakers can converse with the heavens. From that, it can be seen that their divine soul is incomparably powerful. Perhaps they can help you. Furthermore, other than going to see her, do you have any other methods? As for whether you dare or not." The Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master paused for a moment before continuing. "Once you ask her for help, your identity will very likely be lost. I don't know how a heaven speaker will treat a devil. If the two of you meet, it'll truly be troublesome." "Is a heaven speaker's strength really as terrifying as you say?" asked Ning Chen. "It's even worse than that." The Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master calmly replied, "It can be said that if a heaven speaker is in the corporeal realm, they're invincible in the corporeal realm. If they're in the true realm, they're invincible in the true realm. If they open their eyes, the situation will be even more terrifying." Ning Chen was silent. After a moment, he nodded and politely said, "Thank you for your advice. I'll take my leave first. I'll definitely pay you a visit in the future to express my thanks." "No problem." The Xiaoya Chang and restaurant master faintly smiled. "I can't help you with this matter. Just treat this information as a free gift from me. I hope we'll have a chance to work together again in the future." "We definitely will. Until we meet again." Ning Chen responded, then turned around and walked downstairs. On the first floor, was sitting at a table and eating. When she saw Ning Chen come down, she threw down the chopsticks in her hand and ran over. "Did you manage to find a way?" Ina's large eyes flashed with anticipation. "Not at the moment. Let's go find someone else." "She might know," replied Ning Chen as he looked into the distance. "Who?" asked Ina doubtfully. "A heaven speaker." Ning Chen's expression was grave. Chapter 666. On the Wish Planet, Heavenly Speech Peak, it was a paradise in the human world. On the peak, there was an apricot tree full of white flowers that didn't wither in the wind and snow. The apricot flowers blooming in the wind and snow were white and pure, surpassing the cold snow in the sky. Under the apricot tree, there was a woman in a white dress. Her eyes were closed, and she seemed to have merged with heaven and earth. She seemed like she would break through the sky at any moment. The heaven speaker was rumored to be the only human who could communicate with heaven and earth. They were existences comparable to gods and Buddhas, and they had been revered since ancient times. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or perhaps it was because the heavens favored women, but every generation of heaven speaker had been a woman. There had never been a man. At the foot of the mountain, Ningchen held Yiner's hand and walked up. Out of respect, he had chosen to walk up the mountain. The woman didn't seem to know. She continued to observe the world with her eyes closed, experiencing the hardships of the mortal world. Half a day later, Ningchen came up the mountain. He looked at the woman under the apricot tree and politely bowed. "I am Ningchen. Greetings, heaven speaker." The woman turned around and calmly said, "You're here." The heaven speaker's tone was ordinary, as if she was greeting a friend she hadn't seen in many years. It didn't feel out of place at all, and it made people unconsciously lower their guard. Ningchen nodded. "I'm sorry for disturbing you. I came because I have something to ask of heaven speaker." "Speak," said the woman calmly. "I want to know if there is a way to unseal a heavenly soul after it seals itself," said Ningchen. "If there is, then I can do it," said the heaven speaker calmly. Ningchen's eyes lit up when he heard that. "Heaven speaker, please help me." "I can help you, but you have to prove that you won't become the source of disaster," replied the heaven speaker. Ningchen narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean by that?" "Devils are emotionless by nature and love to kill. You are the most special devil I have ever seen, but you are still a devil. That is a fact that cannot be changed." The heaven speaker looked at the young man and calmly said, "It is indeed extraordinary that you have been able to maintain your rationality this entire time. However, you have to prove to me that you will never lose your rationality." Ningchen sighed softly in his heart. He had already been very careful and used the phoenix origin to cover up the demonic energy. However, he still couldn't hide it from the person in front of him. The reputation of a heaven speaker was not in vain. After a moment, Ningchen suppressed the thoughts in his heart and asked, "How do I prove it?" The heaven speaker stepped out from under the tree and said calmly, "Stand under the apricot tree before the sun sets. If you can walk out with your own reason, I promise to help you. If you can't, then leave." The heaven speaker can't help a demon who can bring disaster to the human world at any time. Hearing this, Ningchen looked at the apricot tree and frowned. An apricot tree blooming in the snow was really strange. Nervously grabbed the former's hand and refused to let go. "It's fine." Ningchen comforted her softly. He let go of the little girl's hand and walked forward step by step. When they passed each other, the heaven speaker warned, "Remember to calm your heart. Don't let your demonic nature affect your rationality." "Many thanks." Ningchen agreed and walked towards the apricot tree. The moment the devil walked in, the calm apricot tree immediately began to change. As it swayed, white flowers filled the sky and turned into heavenly stars that revolved around it. Ungo was worried. She was just about to go forward when the heaven speaker stopped her. "Don't get close. This is the power of laws. Your cultivation base is still too low. You won't be able to endure it." The heaven speaker looked at the apricot tree with white flowers revolving around it. "Senior heaven speaker, Ningchen will be fine, right? He's a good person and won't willfully kill the innocent," said Yin-er anxiously. "As long as he doesn't have any thoughts of bringing disaster to the world, he'll be fine." The heaven speaker looked at the figure under the apricot tree. He didn't expose the little girl's well-intentioned lies. The resentment on the devil's body was clearly visible under the apricot tree. With such a dense resentment, it could be seen just how much blood this devil's hands were stained with. She hadn't personally witnessed the past, so she didn't have the qualifications to judge. Now that the devil in front of her was still rational, it was worth testing. Hopefully, the result wouldn't disappoint her. The apricot tree swayed and white flowers filled the sky. It was so beautiful, but it was so dangerous that no one dared to approach. The heaven speaker looked forward, his fingers moving, mouth chanting magical incantations, softly speaking with the heavenly language. The wind rustled through the snowy peak. White flowers filled the sky. The heaven speaker's body flickered with spiritual light. Her fine black hair danced in the wind, making her look like a fairy. Under the apricot tree, Ning Chen let out a muffled groan. Devilish chi crazily surged out and his devilish nature was completely stimulated. Outside the apricot flowers, clenched her fists. She was abnormally nervous. On the mountain, snowflakes and white flowers were constantly revolving. It was impossible to tell them apart. It was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. Within the white flowers, the devil was undergoing the most terrifying devilish test of his life. Ugh! With a pained groan, blood dripped from the corner of the devil's mouth. This was the most direct clash between his devilish nature and reason. In the space of consciousness, the two devils started fighting. Boundless rage surged and roared. The black-haired devil and the white-haired devil. One was as calm as the abyss while the other was as violent as a waterfall. The cold edge of their swords was dyed red. The intense battle became more and more intense. The Taoism's Taisher and the devil's crimson drill cried out in the light of life and death. Devilish nature and reason. One was nature while the other was a reflection of memories. At this moment, they were fighting for control of the body. Space break. The two swords clashed. Wild wind broke through the air. The moves that originated from the same source collided violently. A pool of blood splashed out. He retreated a few steps. The equally matched swords heavily injured the two devils. Devil, why must you suppress your nature? The white-haired devil sneered. The crimson drill in his hand became more and more violent and heavier. The sword that was stained with the blood of thousands of creatures became heavier with every swing. If you forget what you're living for, what's the use of nature? It's just a beast's instinct. The black-haired devil's eyes were as deep as the abyss. Although the devil chi on his sword was also violent, each of his moves was abnormally calm. He was observing his opponent's every flaw. Foolish excuses. It seems like you've been greatly affected by the phoenix form. Then hand over this body to me. As he said that, the white-haired devil pointed his finger at his sword. Boundless sword pressure spread out. Surging devil waves drowned the entire space of consciousness. Devil form, heaven's tears. The devil form appeared again. Heaven's tears of sorrow and the resentment of millions of creatures rose. Dark clouds rolled in the sky. A terrifying pressure swept down, causing the world to tremble. Devil form, blood flame. Seeing this, the devil flames on the black-haired devil's sword rapidly spread. The blood-red flames soared into the sky, forming a terrifying heaven-burning terror. The devil form clashed. Heaven and earth shook violently. The black-haired devil flew out. Taisher's sword stabbed into the ground as blood flowed from his arm. Outside the space of consciousness, under the apricot tree, the white flowers in the sky became chaotic and unstable due to the effects of the battle in the space of consciousness. Not good. The heaven speaker softly said. Her eyes were tightly closed, and a trace of seriousness flashed through her face. Was her reason defeated by her demonic nature? This was the result she was most unwilling to see. Missing her, move back. The heaven speaker calmly ordered. He looked at the figure under the apricot tree, ready to attack at any time. In the space of consciousness, the black-haired devil who was forcefully supporting his injured body stood up once again. Taisher's devil flames surged in his hand. He waved his sword, and an unparalleled sword intent resounded in the sky. The peak of sword intent shone in the world. Swords are killing weapons. Your sword has been contaminated with too many distracting thoughts that shouldn't be there. The white-haired devil snorted. He also raised his sword. A blood-red wave violently surged. A terrifying killing intent dyed the sky red. Devil and sword, there was no distinction between you and me. The sword in the devil in the sword, passed by each other. The two swords clashed. At the same time, the space of consciousness collapsed. The black devil waves continued to spread, destroying everything in sight. Outside the apricot tree, the heaven speaker's expression was grave. The next move would determine the victor. The space of consciousness that had experienced a fierce battle had collapsed to the limit. The two who were separated from each other gathered their remaining strength. The next move was the final move. Ha! Unparalleled devil essence shone like stars. Crimson Sword awakened and rushed to the sky. The black-haired devil also used his strongest move. Sword light gathered around his body, fusing with his devil chi. At the peak, only one appeared. Nirvana. The magnificent sword was like a boundless wave on the sword. It was so dazzling that even heaven and earth seemed to have stopped. In the raging waves, two extremes collided. The entire space of consciousness collapsed. Under the apricot tree, the white flowers sensed something and turned into an inescapable net, sealing the devil's surroundings. It's out! Outside the apricot tree, O was delighted. She ran forward but was blocked by the heaven speaker. Something's wrong, retreat. The heaven speaker pulled and retreated 30 meters away. Under the apricot tree, the white-haired, black-eyed devil opened his eyes. A terrifying devil chi shook violently, attacking the white flowers. Er's body shook. She looked at the devil's eyes with disbelief. Stay here and don't move. The heaven speaker waved his hand and froze the space around him. He stepped forward and guided the heaven and earth spirit chi towards the devil in the white flowers. Heaven speaker? Ha! There was no longer any rationality in his arrogant laughter. Under his fluttering white hair, the devil's eyes were filled with killing intent. With a wave of his hand, Crimson Sword appeared. Devil technique, blood flame. The devil held his sword horizontally. Devil flames surged, burning the sky and boiling the sea. The rising blood-colored flames fiercely attacked the surrounding white flowers. It was an indescribable scene. Seeing that the devil's power had exceeded the limit of the laws, the heaven speaker flipped his hand and sent a seal into the void. The laws of space appeared for the first time. The apricot flowers scattered and the two figures disappeared. When they reappeared, they were already in the void. What a pity, I thought he would be the one to win. The heaven speaker looked at the devil who had lost all rationality and sighed. Did my appearance disappoint you? Humans always sympathize with the weak. That's why they became so cowardly. Now, face this cruel reality, heaven's tears. The white-haired devil snorted and waved Crimson Sword. A blood-colored wave rose and rumbled. Above the 9 heavens, the resentment of millions of living beings appeared. Chapter 667. On the heaven speech peak, the white-haired demonic cultivator was facing the heaven speaker. The 9 heavens fell, and the resentment of millions of living beings surged. Boundless pressure descended upon the world. The demonic cultivator took the initiative, using the resentment of living beings to suppress the heaven speaker. A moment later, he stepped forward and started the battle. The sword arrived, and the flames of war soared into the sky. With the help of demonic energy, the demonic cultivator attacked with a killing move. The heaven speaker raised his hand, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered, blocking the red sword. The sword's aura is cold. Are demons really unable to be purified? With a sigh, the heaven speaker waved his hand, and the demonic cultivator in front of him was pushed away. Soon after, his fingers moved quickly, and a strange seal appeared. The surrounding world sensed it, and the falling snowflakes turned into sharp blades that attacked the demonic cultivator. Blood flame. Seeing this, the demonic cultivator attacked with his red sword, and blood flame appeared. In an instant, the demonic flames around him turned into waves that scattered the snowflakes and sharp blades. Blood flame sky. After one move, the demonic cultivator attacked again. The blood flame changed direction and rushed toward the woman in front of him. The blood flame approached, but the heaven speaker didn't move at all. When the demonic flames were 3 feet away, they automatically stopped and couldn't move forward. Without any words or persuasion, the heaven speaker knew that the demonic cultivator had lost his mind, and there was no turning back. The Heaven Speaker waved his hand to disperse the demonic flames, and with a step, she arrived in front of the demonic cultivator. She raised her hand, and the wind and clouds swirled. With a bang, she pressed her palm on the demonic cultivator's chest. Immediately, blood splattered and fell from the sky. The demonic cultivator took a few steps back, and he raised his hand to wipe off the blood at the corner of his mouth. The wound on his body stimulated the demonic cultivator's berserk nature. With a deep shout, he stepped into the void and used his demonic technique again. Blood path. The blood light opened a path, and the yellow spring returned. In the surging demonic aura, the white-haired demonic cultivator passed by in an instant, and the killing intent on his sword surged as he slashed at the woman in front of him. The Heaven Speaker blocked the sword. Although she was suppressed by the resentment of living beings, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth around her was still powerful. Layers of protective barriers blocked the sword, and the yellow spring couldn't reach her. The Heaven Speaker looked at the devil who had completely lost his mind. Her slender hand pierced through the devil chi and pressed onto the devil cultivator's chest again. The demon took 3 steps back. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The heavens were unshakable. It was so breathtaking that it made one feel despair. However, the demon did not feel this at all. He brandished his sword, and the sword tip surged with bloody radiance. Sonorous sounds of swords rang out incessantly. In the sky above Tianyu Peak, demonic shadows crossed each other continuously. Scarlet flames reflected the sun. They were fast and heavy. Pure demons without feeling, or heart, only killing by nature. In the white snowflakes that filled the sky, it was so dazzling. Amidst the sword light, the Heaven Speaker stood motionless. His body glowed brilliantly as he blocked the demonic sword again and again. The Heaven Speaker of the mortal world was a powerful existence comparable to the gods and Buddhas in ancient times. Before they opened their eyes, they spoke with the heavens. After they opened their eyes, they were a part of the heaven and earth. Mo cultivators were strong, and Tianyu was even more immeasurable. With a raise of his hand, the wind and clouds awaited his orders. After exchanging several moves, it was difficult for the sword to penetrate the heavenly moat. The demonic cultivator's eyes flashed with a blood-red light. With a shout, the heavenly demon's true form appeared in the human world. In the billowing demonic waves, a 300-meter-tall demonic figure descended. A powerful pressure violently swept out. Royal Heavenly Demon. The Heaven Speaker frowned slightly. No wonder the demonic chi on his body was so astonishing. It turned out that he had swallowed the power of a royal heavenly demon. The demonic shadow stepped forward and swept its leg. Crackling sounds rang out. It was a simple move, but it caused the wind to howl and the void to shatter. The incomparably powerful heavenly demon's might dissipated the wind and clouds. The Heaven Speaker raised his hand to block, but with a loud bang, his body that hadn't moved from its original position was forced back half a step. After the Heaven Speaker retreated, the demonic cultivator's wild nature erupted. Demonic flames rose around his body. The heavenly demon's 6 absolutes shook the world. Demonic flames set the prairie ablaze. Demonic flames rose, setting the prairie ablaze. Endless waves of fire attacked the Heaven Speaker in front of him again and again. The heavenly demon's divine ability that shook the ancient times reappeared in the human world today. The Heaven Speaker's body trembled. He took a step forward, and space accepted his command. In an instant he moved hundreds of meters away. What a powerful demon's divine ability! The Heaven Speaker looked at the burnt void in front of him and whispered. Soon after, he twisted his fingers and chanted an incantation in the language of the heavens. A moment later, thunder and lightning flashed in the 9 heavens. Dark clouds gathered and drifting snowflakes turned into a snowstorm, drowning out the demonic flames. Heavenly Demon's 6 absolutes, 1,000 gods burial. Demonic chi spread out, burying the heavens and destroying the gods. The heavenly demon's divine ability shook the heavens and the earth, turning a part of the world into a land of death. The Heaven Speaker turned around, and his figure moved continuously. He once again retreated hundreds of meters away. Seeing the endless demonic chi, he frowned slightly and stopped. With a flip of his palm, spiritual chi gathered from all directions, forming a cage that sealed the spreading demonic chi. Spiritual chi and demonic chi collided, and the wind and clouds fell rapidly. Terrifying aftershocks spread out, and the void collapsed one after another, shocking the world. Below, Inu, who was protected by the power of laws, looked at the battle in the sky. Her big eyes were filled with anxiety and worry. Above, the battle was already white-hot, and it was becoming more and more intense. The demonic cultivator who had transformed into a heavenly demon displayed the ability to fight against the heaven speaker. As demonic chi surged, it was earth-shaking might. 6 ultimates of the heavenly demon, 10,000 demons roared to the heavens. The situation of the battle was difficult to resolve. The demonic cultivators gathered their chi, and violent demonic chi gushed out. Above the void, tens of thousands of demonic shadows appeared, and each of them had a terrifying demonic chi. The appearance of tens of thousands of demons caused the entire world to shake violently. Caught in the midst of the 10,000 demons, even the heaven speaker's expression became serious. She formed a seal with her slender hands, and a brilliant light scattered down from the sky. Radiant power illuminated the world, burning the 10,000 demons. 10,000 demons devour the heavens. The demonic cultivator roared, and the 10,000 demons charged at the heaven speaker. The battle between the saints and demons reached a blazing white. Within the holy light, demonic figures rapidly dissipated, one after another. The saints and demons countered each other, and they were constantly melting. The 10,000 demons were endless, and the holy light was being consumed more and more. The heaven speaker formed another seal, and the power of the sun descended upon the mortal world. The demonic figures howled in grief, and half of them instantly dissipated under the burning of the sun. The demonic chi scattered and was purified by the holy light. You can't stop the demons. The moment the 10,000 demons attacked the holy light, the demonic cultivator's figure swept forward, and a fist that shook the heavens crashed down. The wind and clouds blocked the attack, but they soon dissipated. The heaven speaker retreated 2 steps, and a drop of blood silently dripped from the corner of her mouth. "How is it, heaven speaker? How much can your heavens help you?" The white-haired, arrogant demonic cultivator coldly looked at her. Demonic chi coiled around his body, and for the first time, he displayed a world-shocking ability. Demonic cultivator, the path of no return is long, and you shouldn't fall into it. With another sigh, the heaven speaker released all of his true yuan. Instantly, strange spiritual inscriptions appeared. A moment later, they collapsed and dissipated. The moment the seal dissipated, a red color appeared between the woman's eyebrows. It was abnormally beautiful, as if a bodhisattva had descended to the world. She slowly opened her eyes, and they were like the stars, the sun, and the moon. They were indescribable, and the blue dome of heaven sensed it. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts dispersed the rolling tribulation clouds in the sky. The heaven speaker opened her eyes, and a vision appeared in the sky. Multicolored light rose, and dense mist floated up and down. The laws of heaven and earth coiled around the spirit cultivator. The most mysterious legend in the mortal world had appeared in the mortal world again after countless years. Chapter 668. On Tianyu Peak, the winds and clouds changed rapidly. The heaven speaker had opened his eyes. The most unfathomable existence had appeared for the first time. The woman standing in the air had a bright red forehead. Her plain white dress was spotless, and her fine black hair danced in the wind. She was like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world, stunning the world. Her opened eyes were like stars, like the sun and moon, so beautiful that it made one's heart ache. The heaven speaker had opened his eyes, transforming into the heavens. The most powerful existence had yet to make a move, but an indescribable pressure had already descended. It was as if heaven and earth were bound by a cage, stagnant and difficult to move. The devil was fearless. His white hair danced wildly as he took a step forward. Demonic energy surged like a tide, unceasingly spreading outwards. 6 Ultimates of the Sky Demon, Reincarnation Calamity. Reincarnation Calamity appeared. Above the void, a huge black vortex appeared. One of the most powerful divine abilities of the Sky Demon clan had appeared. Immediately, black lightning descended, adding to the might of the Sky Demon. Demonic lightning struck the heavens. The demonic figure disappeared in an instant, and a huge fist descended. Thousands of lightning bolts surged, its divine might shaking the world. The demonic attack arrived, but the heaven speaker didn't dodge. His eyes that were as brilliant as the sun and moon flashed. Heaven and earth surged, and the lightning instantly disappeared. The body of the devil was then sent flying with heavy injuries. Blood dyed the sky. The difference in strength was indescribable. The heaven speaker who had opened his eyes had transformed into heaven and earth, unshakable. The devil vomited blood. His blood didn't stop flowing, and his wild nature didn't stop. With a shout, his demonic energy surged, and his white hair became wild. Wave after wave of demonic energy rose continuously between heaven and earth. 6 Ultimates of the Sky Demon, Star Transformation. Demonic might rushed into the 9 heavens, and the stars in the universe changed. In the indistinct starry sky, one after another, great stars were drawn in by the demonic might. Their brilliance descended on Tianyu Peak. In an instant, numerous illusory stars revolved around the devil's body. With a step, the great stars sank. Incomparably vigorous origin force erupted, suppressing heaven and earth. The destructive might descended. The heaven speaker raised his hand, and the wind and clouds around him changed. The entire world turned into a barrier, blocking in front of him. The power of the great stars was shocking, breaking through layer after layer of obstruction. However, the world was boundless, and the power was also boundless. The final illusory star collapsed, and it was difficult to pass. Is the Avicii depravity really so irresistible to you? As she spoke, the heaven speaker waved her hand to disperse the demonic chi. Shortly after, her figure disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in front of the demon. She raised her delicate hand and pressed it against the demon's chest. The demonic cultivator groaned and retreated several steps. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth and dyed his body red. Although his body was heavily wounded and his white hair was dyed with blood, the wild nature in the demon cultivator's eyes didn't change at all. He forcefully stabilized himself and reared his head back in laughter. Falling into Avicii, how delightful! The demonic cultivator was arrogant and did not care about the injuries on his body. He took a step forward and started the battle again. Loud bangs rang out incessantly. The demon who had lost his mind had eyes filled with killing intent. He had no sense of reason or emotion. Below, Ina's face was full of tears as she looked at the battle in the sky. Her heart was throbbing with pain. Why did it become like this? It shouldn't be like this, it shouldn't be like this. She was in extreme grief and pain. Ina's body trembled continuously. Her cultivation, which had been suppressed by Feng Yuan, erupted in an instant. A blood-colored pillar of light soared into the sky, connecting the heavens and the earth. In an instant, the dark clouds in the sky rolled and the demonic aura surged. The heavenly demon tribulation had appeared. The change in Tianyu Peak caused the battle to change at the same time. The heavenly demon tribulation descended, and the demonic aura between heaven and earth was unprecedentedly dense. The rolling demonic clouds covered the sky and the sun. The demonic cultivator was stunned for a moment before he laughed loudly. His dark eyes looked at the demonic clouds in the sky and he said crazily, "Heaven Speaker, I will show you what a real demon is." The heavenly demon tribulation descended, and the demonic cultivator's figure moved along with it. He used his demonic body to withstand the heavenly demon tribulation, and his aura rose rapidly. When the demonic cultivator blocked the heavenly demon tribulation, heaven and earth sensed it, and the demonic clouds became stronger. However, as the demonic clouds gathered, the demonic cultivator's aura also rose continuously. Seeing this, the heaven speaker's expression turned serious. She flipped her delicate hand and spoke with the heavens. In an instant, heaven and earth received the order. The demonic clouds quickly dissipated, and the setting sun shone down once again. In a few short breaths, the demonic cultivator's aura had increased by several times. The extremely dense demonic aura shook continuously, and heaven and earth couldn't bear it. It distorted violently and formed a huge black vortex. In the western sky, the setting sun shone alone, and it was about to set. The aura of the great battle had reached the most critical moment. 6 ultimates of the heavenly demon, demonic flames burning the plains. The demonic technique reappeared, and its power was completely different from before. The black demonic flames burned the 9 continents, and the entire sky above Heavenly Speech Peak was drowned. The terrifying scene made all living creatures within 1,000 miles tremble in fear. Looking at the demonic flames that rose violently around her, the heavens speaker frowned slightly. She looked at the setting sun in the sky and took a step forward, and her body slowly rose. "Do you think you can escape?" The demonic cultivator snorted coldly. The flames around him soared into the sky and attacked the former. When the demonic flames approached, they broke through several obstacles and immediately dissipated. However, an endless stream of flames swept over, constantly attacking the obstacles of the laws. Above the 9 heavens, the heaven speaker stood, looking at the demonic cultivator below. With a flip of her delicate hand, the setting sun's final brilliance gathered. The void suddenly trembled, and soon after, the wind and clouds gathered rapidly, forming a huge hand that fell down. It crushed everything, annihilated the demonic flames, and landed on the demonic cultivator's body. A pool of blood splashed out, filling the sky. The demonic cultivator fell from the sky, smashing into Heavenly Speech Peak. The spilled demonic blood dyed Heavenly Speech Peak red. On the apricot tree, the white flowers were also dyed red by the demonic cultivator's blood. It was abnormally dazzling. An irresistible fate. Even if the arrogant demonic cultivator was unyielding, even if he was brave, he had no choice but to be stained with the blood of defeat. The demonic cultivator that had returned to his human form staggered and vomited blood. With a clang, his sword stopped his body. "Don't fight anymore." Ran forward, tears in her eyes. She grabbed the demonic cultivator's arm and begged. The white-haired demonic cultivator's gaze was cold and emotionless. He grabbed the latter's neck, and demonic energy surged, devouring her soul and taking her life. An unexpected scene occurred. The little girl's body trembled, and her vitality quickly flowed out, fusing into the demonic cultivator's body. In the sky, the heaven speaker's expression suddenly changed. Killing intent appeared on her beautiful and peaceful face for the first time. She took a step forward and instantly landed. "The current you is extremely pitiful." The heaven speaker couldn't hide her anger. Her slender hand carried the power of thunder as she slammed it towards the demonic cultivator. The demonic cultivator waved his sword, forcefully blocking the heavenly might. With a world-shaking tremor, he was forced back dozens of steps. Dozens of feet away, the little girl's vitality was gradually fading away. She looked at the demonic cultivator in front of her, and 2 streams of tears silently fell from her eyes. "Wake up." An undetectable voice followed the gradually fading vitality, vanishing into the cold wind. Her tears fell onto the demonic cultivator's hand, but they didn't fall into his heart. Doomsday heavenly punishment, heaven's judgment. Seeing the little girl's vitality gradually fading away, the heaven speaker was unable to restrain her anger. Since she had reincarnated, this was her first judgment. In an instant, thunder fell from the sky above Heavenly Speech Peak. There was no beginning and no end, no end and no end. The scene of doomsday drowned out everything. Chapter 669. The apricot flowers on the Heavenly Speech Peak were dyed red. The heaven speaker was furious as he tried to judge the heavenly punishment for the first time. Lightning covered the entire Heavenly Speech Peak. The frightening heavenly might spread out endlessly, reaching thousands of miles away. In the lightning, demonic aura overflowed and blocked the heavenly punishment one after another. The demonic aura that surpassed the limits of the mortal world resisted the wrath of the heavens. In the hands of the demonic cultivator, the little girl's life force was gradually dissipating. Suddenly, on the heavenly speech peak, snowflakes started to fall. This is... The sudden change stunned the heaven speaker and the demonic cultivator. After a while, the demonic cultivator came back to his senses and let go of the little girl in his hands, retreating quickly. The heaven speaker also waved his hand to stop the heavenly punishment. He looked at the little girl not far away and was surprised. The snowflakes drifted in the air. It was so beautiful and enchanting. In Inu's body, an extremely powerful sword, intense sword into the sky, crisscrossing and magnificent. The light on the sword bloomed beautifully in the snowflakes. The strongest sword surpassed the peak and stood alone. Nirvana. It turns out that you never believed in me. The sword light arrived. The demonic cultivator's eyes were extremely gloomy. He stepped forward and waved his red sword to block the nirvana. The sword intent was endless, and so was the sword light. In order to protect his disciple, the phoenix body had used the nirvana when she was alive. He was caught off guard and lost the initiative. The sword that was right in front of him was extremely fast. The demonic cultivator waved his red sword and blocked most of the sword light, but he could not block the final sword. A dazzling bloody light shone. The red sword that was refined by phoenix blood flew out from Inu's body and was guided by the nirvana. It turned into the final sword light and pierced through the demonic cultivator's body. With a groan, he fell to the ground. Snowflakes flew everywhere and the demonic cultivator vomited blood. His violent gaze gradually lost its sharpness. In the sky, the phantom of the red robe appeared. The remaining soul imprint almost dissipated after one sword. In front of Inu, the red robe raised his hand and gathered the last of his soul power and poured it into the little girl's body to restore her life force. Master. Inu opened her eyes and tears fell from her eyes. Her face was pale. I'm not used to calling you Ningchen. Ningchen revealed a gentle smile and said softly. When Inu heard this, her tears turned into laughter. Just as she was about to speak, she realized that the former's figure was disappearing continuously. She could not help but feel anxious. Don't worry, it's just a soul imprint left on you. It's just that I've used up all my strength. Demons are heartless by nature. Xiazi is like that, and so is the demonic body. However, if Xiazi can regain his rationality, so can the demonic body. In the knowing destiny state, you won't lose to anyone, let alone yourself. Ningchen said calmly. Then, the remnant of his soul gradually dissipated into the heavens and the earth. For the last time, he looked at the heaven speaker, nodded slightly, and then disappeared. Heaven speaker, please. The final request reverberated endlessly on heavenly word peak, not dissipating for a long time. In front of the apricot tree, the heaven speaker looked at the dissipating red light in the sky and sighed softly. His eyes that were like the sun, moon, and stars slowly closed, and his aura was restrained. Step by step, she walked towards the heavily injured and unconscious demon. The heaven speaker raised his hand, and wind and clouds gathered. Upon seeing this, Inu forcefully supported her body that had yet to fully recover and jogged over to stand in front of him. Her eyes were filled with pleading, "Don't kill him." "Don't worry, I'm not going to kill him." The heaven speaker responded softly and lifted his hand to push the little girl away. Then, he condensed wind and clouds and poured them into the demon's body. With the power of the heavens and the earth, he sealed the demon. Then, he found the phoenix origin and heaven soul and forcefully pulled them out from the demon's body. The phoenix is noble by nature, but it actually gave its origin to a human. Since the phoenix has chosen to trust you, I will choose to trust you again. As soon as he finished speaking, the heaven speaker flipped his hand and spoke with the heavens. With the power of the heavens and the earth, he released the seal on the heaven soul. In an instant, snowflakes circled around heavenly word peak. The majestic spiritual chi stabilized the laws of the heavens. The moment the seal was released, it helped knowing Destiny's heaven soul to avoid the punishment of the laws. The red coat that was floating in the wind and snow was extremely weak. After being chased by Master Mo, the 3 kings of Jinsi, and the 13 envoys of the Hall of the Dead, even the powerful phoenix could not spread its wings and soar. The spiritual chi of the heavens and the earth nourished the soul. Knowing Destiny's weak soul body gradually stabilized. The phoenix origin entered and returned to its master's body. The phoenix origin returned and evolved its bloodline. The body of the phoenix rapidly solidified at a speed visible to the naked eye and gradually recovered its original appearance. Not long after, the heaven speaker stopped and pondered for a moment. He looked at the little girl beside him and said softly, "I have done what I can do. The rest is up to you." Hearing this, wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and said, "What can I do? Your master is entangled with too much karma. If it is not removed, it will be difficult for his body to fully recover. In this world, the best way to remove karma is to have the people's faith or to pray for blessings. However, your master is not a Buddha or a god. He does not have his own believers, so you can only rely on you to pray one by one," the heaven speaker said seriously. "How many people do you need?" Mer asked. "I'm not sure." The heaven speaker shook his head and said, "With different karma, there will be more people who need to pray for blessings. It may be thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands. Your master's karma is the most terrifying I have ever seen. It is not easy to remove it. You need to be mentally prepared. People's hearts are complicated, and it is difficult to distinguish between good and evil. The path of praying for blessings will definitely be filled with difficulties and obstacles. If you do not wake up, your master will not be able to wake up." Ain-er nodded firmly and said, "I will go down the mountain now and find someone to pray for blessings." After saying this, Ain-er walked to the front of the phoenix body and turned her back. She took one last look at the demon body not far away and walked down the mountain step by step with a gloomy expression. Looking at the little girl's determined back, the heaven's speaker gently sighed. In this child, she saw the most beautiful thing of humanity. A phoenix and a demon. One was noble and pure, the other was dark. Their personalities were completely different. To what extent could a child brought up by these two bodies reach this level? On the apricot tree on the peak, the blood on the white flowers had been purified. The white flowers bloomed in the snowflakes, pure and untainted. The heaven speaker turned around and looked at the demon body covered in snowflakes. With a wave of his hand, the demon body rose and flew to the apricot tree. Reason, demonic nature. You have failed the first test. I will give you another chance. If you still cannot suppress your demonic nature this time, you will be buried under the apricot tree forever. You will never be able to leave this place in this lifetime. At the foot of the heaven speech mountain, the delicate little girl carried the phoenix body and walked down the mountain towards the mortal world step by step. The setting sun in the west gradually lost its warmth. The cold night was coming, but the little girl did not seem to know. She did not stop walking and her heart was firm. Praying for blessings could remove karma. However, if one was not a deity, how could they receive blessings from the common people? Who would be willing to pray for a stranger? Praying for one person was easy. Praying for 10 people was equally easy. However, praying for 1,000 or 10,000 people was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The little girl knew this in her heart. However, if she did not do it, no one would do it. After Sister Qing Ning's accident, Ning Chen no longer had a family in this life. He had always been protecting her. This time, it was time for her to do something for him. Chapter 670. In the mortal world, the imperial city was bustling. On a festive day, the lanterns on the riverside were lit. Beautiful people were traveling on boats. It was a magnificent scene. In the distance, the little girl was carrying a red-clothed young man. She went from house to house, knocking on their doors, praying for blessings on this festive day. The commoners were kind and mercifully sent their blessings. The commoners were cold and merciless, chasing away the uninvited guests. The warmth and coldness of a person's heart was reflected clearly when the little girl knocked on their doors. Wearing the moon and stars, her hair was dyed with frost. As if she didn't know, she continued to sincerely knock on the doors of one commoner after another, praying for the person behind her. Hurry up and leave. Don't be an eyesore here. The festive day really is disappointing. After being rejected countless times, In silently left with Ning Chen on her back. Her expression didn't change at all as she continued to walk to the next house. The coldness of a person's heart would always make people feel hatred when it didn't concern them. However, if it didn't concern them, who would think they had an obligation to offer their kindness to others? Didn't have any hatred or resentment. She walked step by step on the street, her gaze never once looking at the bustling scene in the distance. Because the street was far away, it was very quiet. It was a stark contrast to the bustling riverside. Her lonely figure was so weak. Even if she was a Xiantian, at this moment, she was the most helpless person in the mortal world. Praying for blessings was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. In the mortal world, perhaps only the illusory gods could receive so much worship. In the end, humans were inferior to gods. Knock knock. Stopped in front of another commoner's house and knocked on the door. She was so careful that she didn't want to make the owner unhappy. With a creak, the door opened. It was a pregnant woman. Her appearance was pretty, but the light in her eyes wasn't so friendly. "Madam, can you pray for my master? Just one blessing is enough." Una looked at the woman in front of her, her face filled with sincerity. "I'm not in the mood. Hurry up and leave," the woman said with an unhappy expression. Then she slammed the door shut. In front of the door, Ina's expression was slightly gloomy. She bowed and sent her blessings to the child who was about to be born. Then she continued walking to the next house. "Who is it?" A man's voice rang out from the room. "A lunatic," the woman said impatiently. Not far away, under the night sky, ripples appeared in the void, and a shadow in plain white clothes appeared with his eyes closed. The heaven speaker, who rarely opened his eyes, could not help but sigh softly at this moment as he looked at the warmth and coldness of the human world. Wasn't such a heavy burden too heavy for this child? However, if she could not persevere, then the young man on her back would never wake up again. Tianyu sighed. Why was it that people would rather travel thousands of miles to worship the gods and Buddhas who had never given them the slightest bit of help, than give a simple blessing to a kind-hearted child? The human heart was sometimes even colder and scarier than a demon. As the cold wind blew, the white shadow in the night disappeared. On the whole street, there was only a little girl carrying the unconscious red-clothed young man on her back, moving forward step by step. It was the most extravagant and filthy place in the world. Perhaps it didn't sound nice, but everyone knew and deeply believed that actors were heartless and prostitutes were disloyal. Walked with a phoenix on her back. Under the light, her delicate little face was full of hardships, and her exhaustion was difficult to conceal. In a brothel, a woman in a thin garment saw this, and a hint of pity flashed through her beautiful eyes. She took a cup of hot tea from a nearby table and walked out. "Little girl, drink a cup of hot tea to warm up your body. It's free," the woman said softly as she handed over the hot tea. Air took a sip of the tea and felt her body gradually warm up. She looked at the beautiful woman in front of her with her big eyes and happily smiled as she said, "Thank you, big sister. Can big sister help me pray for master? Just a blessing will do." The woman looked at the unconscious red-clothed young man on the young girl's back, and a glimmer of light flashed through her beautiful eyes. She nodded and said, "Sure. Then elder sister will wish your master a speedy recovery and a peaceful life." "Little sister, you too," the woman said with a gentle expression. "Thank you, elder sister. Also wishes elder sister a happy life." She sincerely wished and prayed for blessings. Threads of invisible light merged into heaven and earth, merging into the woman's body. She hoped that good and evil would be repaid, and that those with kind hearts would live a happy life. Looking at the little girl's departing figure, the woman sighed softly. She turned and walked into the brothel. A smile once again appeared on her beautiful face as she welcomed guests who came to seek pleasure. She prayed for 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people. She saw the fickleness of people's hearts and the various states of the world. The little girl saw it all clearly, and she saw it all with heartache. When kind people didn't receive good karma and suffered for their entire lives, who would preside over justice in the world? The illusory gods and Buddhas that filled the sky never cared about the fickleness of the world. Why were people still willing to pay for the gods and Buddhas as before, and not willing to look at the people around them? Step by step, the little girl walked in the dark night, thinking hard and puzzled. Her aura quietly changed without her noticing, and her mental state rapidly rose, surpassing the 5 tribulations, surpassing the 3 tribulations, and nearing perfection. On Tianyu Peak, the heaven speaker stood in front of the apricot tree, looking at the little girl's changes in the distance. A strange expression flashed through his face. Perhaps she had found the person she had been looking for. The Tianfu planet, a sacred land full of vitality. After going through the calamity of forging the star soul-flowing fire, the Tianfu planet that didn't grow a single blade of grass had finally recovered after many years of recuperation. In the sacred land, a woman in a light purple dress was planting flowers and plants in places where there were no plants. The hibiscus flowers were blooming, and they were so beautiful. In the past, the phoenix body had kidnapped her and forced her to go far away. However, the phoenix body wasn't a bloodthirsty person, and in the end, it had chosen to set her free. Mujin, the weather today is pretty good. Go and push your master out for a walk, said the Tianfu sword sovereign, who was dressed in black. Okay. Shi Mujin got up and nodded, then walked towards a small courtyard not far away. Not long after, Shi Mujin pushed the wheelchair out. On the wheelchair, the unconscious Chao Tianxi was calm and peaceful. In order to protect the Tianfu planet, the Tianfu star sovereign, 1-star Morning Shi, had sacrificed his life and body to support the Ice Divine Tower. After many years, he still hadn't woken up. The Tianfu planet, which had gone through a great calamity, was steadily recovering its vitality. Shi Mujin pushed the wheelchair to the highest point in the sacred land, where the view was the best. Master, the Tianfu planet is getting better and better, said Shi Mujin softly as she looked at the vast mountains and rivers below. To the side, the Tianfu sword sovereign sighed softly. A great calamity had changed too many things. Fortunately, there were star sovereigns, life-knowing cultivators, and the 30 heavenly palace sovereigns. The heroes were gone, but the mountains and rivers were still there. The benevolent ones hoped that the heavens would protect them. At this moment, in the sacred land, dust rose without wind, and the grass and trees swayed. An unending sword intent swept over. It didn't have any killing intent, but it made the entire sacred land lose its color. A distinguished guest has arrived. Mu Chang'e turned around and looked at the figure walking over from afar. He narrowed his eyes. In the distance, a man in luxurious green clothes walked over steadily. Although he looked young, he had the demeanor of a grandmaster. He was clearly one of the top swordsmen in the world, and he had appeared in the Tianfu Holy Land. Behind the king was a pretty girl with a sword rack on her back. On the rack were 5 swords with different auras. They were quiet and peaceful. The legend of the Xia dynasty. Mu Chang'e emphasized these words. It was the first time they met, but the feeling of the swords was familiar. The life-knowing swords had a similar aura. It was obvious who had taught the life-knowing swords. Xia Yan has come to worship swords. Let's go, said Prince Yan calmly as he stopped in front of the sacred land's peak. Mujin, take the star sovereigns away. The sacred land will do its best to host our distinguished guest, said Mu Chang'e, glancing at the girl behind him. Yes. Shi Mujin agreed and pushed Tianxi in her wheelchair into the distance. Ah man, you can leave too, said Prince Yan. Okay. Ah man nodded obediently. She put down the rack and walked away. Please. Prince Yan looked at the Tianfu sword sovereign and said seriously, let's go. Please. Mu Chang'e waved his hand. In the distance, a simple but brilliant sword flew over. The divine weapon Heavenly Tower reappeared after so many years. When the sword was unsheathed, it shone brightly. The most perfect divine weapon reappeared with the sharpest radiance. Prince Yen walked to the rack and held the sword with both hands. The green and red sword was unsheathed. The sword radiance was dazzling. Eighth sword, Imperial Sword. Knowing that the opponent before him was different from the others, Mu Chang'e didn't hold back. He waved the Heavenly Tower and used his ultimate move. Instantly, sword intent spread above the sacred land. The Imperial Sword appeared again. The heroic aura of the sword quickly gathered in all directions. The Imperial Sword made all the swords in the world submit to it. Prince Yen looked at the sword intent gathering in the sky. A smile flashed across his calm face. Finally, he met a worthy sword opponent. The Imperial Sword appeared. The golden sword radiance lit up the world. The noble sword started the battle. Sword sound, flying swan. The green sword slashed down. Ice and snow shone. The sound of the sword resonated. The ice and snow turned into a radiance and rushed into the sky to meet the Imperial Sword. With a rumbling sound, the swords clashed. The aftermath of the collision surged. Even though he had restrained his cultivation, only the sword light remained. It was still indescribably dazzling. Heaven and earth found it difficult to bear, rumbling and shaking. In the distance, Shimujin looked at the battle. She couldn't hide the shock in her beautiful eyes. It had been so many years, but this was the first time she saw a swordsman who could fight equally with the sword sovereign. In the sacred land, sword radiance shone brightly. It was fast, heavy, and strong. The black and green robes intertwined. The swords in their hands clashed continuously. The thrill of standing at the peak of the battle spread to every corner of the sacred land. Ninth sword, Divine Domain. The sword intent kept rising and accumulating. The ninth sword appeared. In an instant, everything was still. Then, the sword radiance shot into the sky. Heaven and earth turned into a world of swords. The Tianfu battle immortal reappeared in the divine domain. The sky was filled with thousands of swords. The most shocking sword made the world tremble. Chapter 671. In the heavenly province Holy Land, the strongest swords in the world started to fight. The divine domain on the sword spread, and the surrounding world became a world of the sword. Without beginning or end, endless sword light crisscrossed in the divine domain. The pinnacle of swords appeared again today, and it was so beautiful that it made people sink into it. In the battle, the void couldn't bear the pinnacle of swords. It dissipated for no reason, and the ground collapsed inch by inch. 100 feet away, Man and Shimujin retreated again, avoiding the expanding divine domain on the sword. In the sword domain, Mu Chang'e's figure disappeared instantly. With the boost of the divine domain, his speed and sword force increased rapidly. Before he could react, the sword had already reached him. The sword was close at hand. Although it didn't have any killing intent, it was still extremely sharp. In a battle of swords, there was no mercy. The red sword met it head-on. Rainbow light filled the eyes and heat waves surged. The sword that was also at the pinnacle drew a rainbow light under the setting sun and collided with Tingtian, Quebec. The two people who stood at the pinnacle of the world had reached the pinnacle of swords. Between the swords, a grand spirit existed forever. This feeling is so nostalgic. Prince Yen revealed a rare smile. The green sword gathered, and frost drifted in the air. The sword danced, breaking the heavens and sinking mountains. With a bang, the two swords collided, and waves of anger surged. In the sword domain, everything fell, and the world collapsed, turning into nothingness. The legend of Grand Xia lives up to his name. Mu Chang'e's expression was full of respect for his opponent. He had never seen such an opponent in his life. The two people fought in the void, and the aftermath of the battle filled the void. Ultimate martial energy spread, and the laws couldn't repair the damage of the world. The world's pinnacle sword technique, the sword domain, gradually collapsed in the aftermath. Seeing that the divine domain was about to dissipate, the scattered sword light suddenly sped back and condensed into one. 10th sword, Zhu Xian. Mu Chang'e pointed at the sword, and his vital energy rose. A terrifying sword pressure spread out, and the void that was about to recover collapsed again. The heavenly peak of the Holy Land sank 10 feet. Zhu Xian's sword, the world was vast, and the heroic spirit of the sword gathered in the void. A simple sword appeared and slashed down from the sky. A sword that surpassed the limits descended upon the mortal realm. In the distance, the immortal extermination sword in the sword rack sensed it and trembled continuously, wanting to break free. Prince Yen frowned slightly. He waved his hand and the green sword returned to its scabbard. Boundless coldness surged and sealed the restless fairy-slaying sword. At this moment, above the void above, the 10th sword was about to fall. Mu Chang'e had no time to withdraw his move. The earth-shattering sword, with the power of destruction, descended upon the world. The celestial slaying sword calmed down. Prince Yen turned his head and looked at the ancient sword of destruction falling from the sky. The red sword spun and a dazzling rainbow light rose. The sword faced the sky. The two swords collided. There was an instant of silence, and then a great terror that seemed like the sky was falling and the earth was rending. The aftershock of the destruction rapidly spread out, swallowing everything in its path. On the sacred ground, lines of formation runes quickly came to life, stabilizing the shaking mountain. Outside the battle, on the wheelchair, Chao Tianxi, who had been unconscious all this time, was affected by the boundless battle intent in the battle. His closed eyes slowly opened, and after a short period of confusion, he gradually regained his clarity. In the distance, in the collapsing world, the aftershock dissipated. A drop of blood fell from the hand of the king holding the sword, dyeing the sword red. On the opposite side, Mu Chang'e looked at the king's injured hand with respect. However, the sword in his hand did not stop at all. The best way to respect an opponent was to go all out and not stop halfway. The rising sword intent became more and more dazzling. The next move was the sword that would decide the outcome. Sword 11. With the sound of the 11th sword, the sword light gushed out like rain, shooting into the sky. It was dazzling. The most perfect sword, stealing the creation of the world. In an instant, within a radius of 1,000 miles, the sky lost its color. Only the sword light remained. The 11th sword appeared. In the battle, Prince Yen looked at the sky, and a strange light flashed in his calm eyes. The 11th sword is indeed a perfect move that exhausts the limits of the sword. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Prince Yen took a step forward and jumped into the sky. He clenched his left hand, and sword light shot into the sky. I have more than one sword. Green and red blades appeared, and the sand sword circled around. 3 swords in the sky, and the world changed color. 3 swords equal the heavens, life and death contract. The 3 swords circled and turned into a huge sword storm. They kept spreading and colliding with the world's perfect sword. There was an earth-shattering collision. The 2 swords rapidly devoured each other, and a terrifying shockwave spread out. The sky above the heavenly sanctum instantly turned into a black void, swallowing all the light. The 3 swords fell and returned to the sword rack. On the other side, Heavenly Tower also fell from the sky and stabbed into the ground. A draw. Outside the battle, Shimujin squinted her eyes. No. Chao Tianxi slowly got up from the wheelchair and looked at the battle. The outcome has been decided. Master. Shimujin came back to her senses, and her beautiful face lit up. She said excitedly, "You're finally awake. I made you worry." Looking back at Tianxi, she nodded gently and then walked forward. In the battle, the 2 people slowly descended from the sky. They withdrew their sword intent and did not attack again. "Thank you," Prince Yen said seriously. "You're welcome." With a wave of his hand, Heavenly Tower flew out and disappeared into the sacred palace in the distance. The legend of the Eastern Region swordsman is indeed very talented. I, Chao Tianxi, am impressed. The heavenly sanctum's star venerate walked over and sighed. The path of the sword was difficult and rugged. To be able to walk a path that completely belonged to oneself, such a person was really terrifying. At least, after so many years, the legend of the great Xia was the first swordsman she had seen who did not cultivate any other techniques at all. He used the sword as a move and created moves with the sword. He was a genius of a generation. Heavenly Sanctum's star venerate. Prince Yen looked at the woman in front of him and said calmly, "My junior offended you in the past. I thank you on his behalf for sparing his life." "No need." Chao Tianxi shook her head and said, "The Jiming Marquis was able to keep his life, not because I was merciful, but because he worked hard. Moreover, the Heavenly Sanctum star was saved because of the Jiming Marquis. He's the greatest benefactor of the Heavenly Sanctum." Prince Yen was a little surprised and said, "With his strength, he was able to keep his life from the star venerate. It seems that the star venerate was badly injured when he broke the boundary of Pluto. There are gains and losses." Chao Tianxi sighed and looked at the girl not far away. She asked with a strange expression, "Who is this?" "Ah man, the former little princess of the barbarian dynasty in the eastern region," Prince Yen said honestly. "She has a clear mind and is a genius in martial arts." Chao Tianxi squinted her eyes and praised, "In order to find the weakness of the Jiming Marquis, I asked someone to investigate the people around him. I've heard of this girl. She and the Jiming Marquis are a perfect couple. Unfortunately, that guy doesn't know how to cherish her." Prince Yen looked regretful, but it disappeared in a flash. He looked at the girl and said, "Ah man, come and greet the star venerate." Ah man answered obediently. Then she went forward and bowed respectfully. She said, "Greetings, Senior Star Venerate." The Star Venerate nodded and raised her hand. Wisps of origin aura gathered and pointed between the girl's eyebrows. She said softly, "I don't have a chance to return the favor to the Jiming Marquis, so I'll return it to you. If you meet him in the future, please thank him for me." Ah man nodded and said, "There's one more thing." Chao Tianxi hesitated. After thinking for a while, she said, "The Jiming Marquis left a demon body to help the inner world resist the invasion of the Heaven Mansion. I noticed that the sects in the inner world were quite afraid of the Jiming Marquis, so I asked him to be careful." "It's too late." Mu Chang'e said, "When the star venerate was in a coma, I went to the inner world. Miss Qing Ning died in front of the Jiming Marquis. Now the Jiming Marquis has completely turned into a demon and is no longer what he used to be. Sister Qing Ning is not dead." Ah man couldn't help but interrupt and deny it. "What?" Hearing this, Mu Chang'e was surprised. He asked, "What happened?" "There are many twists and turns in this matter. It can't be explained in 1 or 2 sentences. However, now we can be sure that Qing Ning still has a chance to survive. It depends on whether her will to live is strong enough," Prince Yen said calmly. Mu Chang'e nodded slightly and said, "If that's the case, the Jiming Marquis may have a chance to turn back. When we fought by the old water railing, I saw that the Jiming Marquis didn't have a trace of human emotion. He was so sad that he lost his mind. It can be seen that what happened to Miss Qing Ning was a big blow to him. The sects in the central province also paid a painful price for this. There's no need to judge who is right and who is wrong. I watched Ning Chen grow up. In terms of cultivation talent, he may not be very good, but his inner strength is incomparable to others. This blow won't knock him down. At least, before the Rakshasa girl of the netherworld wakes up, he has to continue on his path," Prince Yen replied. "The Jiming Marquis once asked me about the way to bring the dead back to life. In fact, we all know the truth. There's absolutely no way to bring people back to life in the world. I'm worried that in the end, the Jiming Marquis will find that his path is in vain. How painful will that be?" Chao Tianxi sighed softly. "It's okay." Prince Yen opened his mouth and said, "Ning Chen is smarter than anyone else. What the world knows, he knows better than anyone else. The path of cultivation has always been against the heavens. Perhaps, at the end of this path, there are still realms that we don't know of, just like that Pluto. Isn't it also unacceptable that there are gods in the human world? Is he looking forward to a miracle? I hope the miracle he's looking for really exists," Chao Tianxi sincerely wished. Prince Yen nodded and said, "The matter here has been settled. I won't disturb you anymore. I'll take my leave first. See you again if fate wills it. Goodbye. Chao Tianxi and Mu Chang'e nodded and didn't stay for long. Beside them, Man carried the sword rack on his back and followed the senior out of the heavenly province Holy Land. They didn't leave a trace of dust behind them, just like when they came. Looking at the two's receding figures, Mu Chang'e looked at the Star Venerable beside him and said, "Since the Star Venerable has woken up, my task is over. I hope the Star Venerable will allow me to leave for a few days." Chao Tianxi sighed and said, "Go ahead." Mu Chang'e took one last look at the figure in the distance. Then he stepped forward and turned into a flowing light that disappeared into the deepest part of the heavenly province Holy Land. "Master, the sword Venerable doesn't look right." Shi Mujin walked over with a puzzled look in his eyes. The 11th sword was defeated. Chao Tianxi sighed softly and said, "If I'm not wrong, Chang'e left this time to prepare for the 12th sword with all his strength." Chapter 672. In this world of ice and snow, the little girl walked alone. She still hadn't woken up. She didn't know how long she had walked, or how many people she had bowed to, but she hadn't stopped for even a moment. Her clothes were soaked with sweat, and her forehead was dyed red with blood. The winter wind was bone-chilling. She hadn't slept or rested for many days. Even though she had entered the Xiantian realm, she gradually couldn't hold on. With each step she took, her delicate body would stagger. Not far away, in the village, the clanging sound of iron striking could be heard, one after another. The little girl raised her head and looked ahead. There wasn't much light in her eyes. After a few more steps, her consciousness suddenly blurred and she silently fell into the snow. In the village, in front of the blacksmith's shop, the little boy who was chopping firewood saw this and immediately ran over. "Mother, someone fainted." Seeing the two unconscious figures in the snow, the little boy's immature face became anxious. He shouted towards the house behind him. Not long after he finished speaking, a woman walked out of a house not far away. When she saw the two figures lying in the snow in front of the village, she turned around and said, "Father, someone has really fainted. Quickly go and take a look." In the house, an honest-looking middle-aged man put down his hammer and immediately looked outside. "It's a little girl and a young man." When the middle-aged man saw this, he didn't dare to delay any longer. He quickly walked out and called out, "Mother, come and help." But the woman threw down the things in her hands and quickly followed. In the snow, the blood on the unconscious girl's forehead could still be seen. She had bowed to countless people and begged countless families just to pray for blessings. The man carried the red-robed young man on his back and helped the woman and boy lift the girl up. He carefully walked towards the village. In the house, a fire was burning. It was very warm inside, a sharp contrast to the cold outside. The man and woman helped the two unconscious people lie down on the bed inside the house. Then they quickly brought hot water to warm up their bodies. "Call the doctor over." The woman looked at the two young people on the bed and couldn't help but say, "Yes, please." The man hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. "I'll call the doctor." Hearing this, the little boy jogged out of the house and ran into the village. Not long after, an old man in a green robe was dragged in by the little boy. After entering the house, he let out a long sigh. "Dr. Li, quickly take a look at these two children," the woman said with a worried expression. "That depends." The old man put down the medicine box and walked forward. He took the pulse of the two people one by one. His old face couldn't help but reveal a strange expression. "What a strange pulse. How is it?" the man asked. "This young lady is fine. She's just exhausted from running around for a long time. She'll recover after resting for a few days. However, this young man's pulse." At this point, the old man gently shook his head and said, "This is not the pulse that an ordinary person should have. Or rather, this is not the pulse that a living person should have." In Mo Planet, 3 figures stood respectfully in front of the platform of the Legacy Summit. The 5th Summit, 6th Summit, and 7th Summit, the 3 Summit Masters were all present, quietly waiting to receive their orders. "Old 5. On the Dao platform, Mo Zhu lightly said, how long have you been in the sect? 300 years, Chi Huan said respectfully. So it's been so long. A trace of emotion flashed through Mo Zhu's old eyes. Looking at the various peaks that had already become empty, he said, "How's your cultivation of the immortal technique I taught you? This disciple's aptitude is lacking. I'm still unable to comprehend the essence of the immortal technique." Chi Huan lowered his head and replied. Hearing this, Mo Zhu slightly frowned and said, "Come forward." Chi Huan raised his head and took a step forward, walking to the Dao platform. Mo Zhu raised his hand and a seven-colored brilliance shone. An ancient and primordial power continuously poured into Chi Huan's body. It was vast and boundless. A terrifying pressure caused the entire Mo mountain to shake. Ugh! An extremely painful groan sounded. Blood flowed from the corner of Chi Huan's mouth. It was difficult for him to bear the might of the immortal technique entering his body. The dazzling seven-colored brilliance became brighter and brighter. Chi Huan's aura also became stronger and stronger. He broke through the limits of the void realm and stepped into the corporeal realm. Blood scattered between heaven and earth. The price of forcefully raising his cultivation was also unbearable. Chi Huan's body constantly trembled and was bathed in blood. After a quarter of an hour, Mo Zhu withdrew his hand and his aura. Looking at the person in front of him, he calmly said, "Go. Don't disappoint your master." Chi Huan's body was still trembling. He stood up with difficulty and immediately turned to walk down the legacy peak. A trace of sorrow flashed in the eyes of the 6th and 7th Peaks masters as they silently lowered their heads. True martial planet. In the boundless wilderness, there was a lonely city. It was completely destroyed by the war hundreds of years ago. Now no one lived in it. In the city, Purple Marquis quietly waited in a dilapidated mansion. There was only one person in the huge city. Xiang Yuan had yet to return. Luo went out to look for medicine as usual, leaving Zichuan to guard the stronghold. After waiting for a few days, Purple Marquis's face gradually showed impatience. His aura became restless and his heart was filled with irritation. At this moment, dark clouds rolled in the sky above the city and thunder rumbled. Amidst the shocking pressure, an azure-clothed figure appeared and slowly descended. Purple Marquis looked at the figure that appeared in the sky. He was startled and shocked. How did he find this place? "Zichuan, come back with me." Chi Huan landed on the ground and a boundless pressure spread out. The entire city collapsed with a bang. The mountains sank and the ground fell. "I can't do it." Purple Marquis's expression sank. "Then die." Chi Huan took a step forward and condensed Yuan with a flip of his palm. This sudden killing move came without any warning. Purple Marquis focused and waved his hand. A violet sword appeared and blocked Chi Huan's palm. Purple Marquis's palm split open and blood sprayed out. He was forced back several steps, blood flowing out of his arm. "Impossible! How can you have such a cultivation base?" Purple Marquis's expression sank. "I'll say it again. Come back with me," said Chi Huan. "Impossible." Purple Marquis stepped forward, his sword once more opening the chapter of life and death. Their palms and swords collided, each of them a prelude to death. Although their gazes seemed emotionless, tears of blood fell from their hearts. The desolate city had been turned into ruins by their battle. Dust and boulders flew everywhere, blocking the sun. There was no doubt that he had once been like him. He knew that he had also been unable to control himself. While Zichuan's heart ached, the light on his sword grew faster and faster. He had to survive, he had to survive. Chi Huan's face was emotionless, and he didn't show any mercy. Each of his moves was earth-shattering. The battle was more intense than he had imagined. Purple Marquis was even more shocked. He raised his sword's power to the limit to contend with his opponent. Ugh! With a muffled groan, Chi Huan's palm broke through the sword and landed on Purple Marquis's chest. He was forced back several steps, his mouth red. Seeing that the situation was unfavorable, Purple Marquis raised his left hand and condensed Yuan. Rays of sword light wrapped around his sword and an immortal art appeared. Immortal art, purple rainbow piercing the sun. Immortal techniques were unleashed, and purple rainbows filled the sky. Sword intent filled the air, splitting the sky and splitting the sea. Qi Huan narrowed his eyes. Zichuan, a true immortal art should be like this. 7 rainbow burying the sun. Qi Huan raised his hand, and the power of laws within 100 miles crazily surged. An illusory divine sun appeared in the void in front of him. It instantly shattered and devoured the person in front of him. The rainbow-colored and purple rainbows collided, and a terrifying shockwave rushed out. The terrifying power instantly annihilated the surrounding void and blasted everything within 100 miles. In the shockwave, purple Marquis flew out. Blood splattered like rain, and he was in a sorry state. Demon descends. Without hesitation, purple Marquis stopped. Black chi rose from his body, and violent black waves rose endlessly. In the black chi, Zichuan's face quickly changed. Demonic runes crisscrossed, and the pupils in his pale eyes disappeared. It was unusually eerie, and it made people feel a chill in their hearts. In the next moment, 100 feet tall demonic shadow appeared, and a majestic demonic aura penetrated the ground. With the demonic soul in his body, purple Marquis' internal injuries were suppressed. He moved his feet, and his figure disappeared instantly. The sword fell, and the demonic shadow behind him punched at the same time. Wherever the demonic aura and sword momentum passed, the void collapsed and turned into nothingness. Qi Huan narrowed his eyes, and a rainbow-colored brilliance gathered on his palm, blocking the incoming attack. With a roar that could split the sky and the sea, the two retreated together. Blood stained their clothes. Immortal art, shocking rainbow. Before the shockwave dissipated, a rainbow-colored light flashed, breaking through space and instantly arriving in front of Qi Huan. Purple Marquis swung his sword to block, but suddenly his body became sluggish, and he couldn't use his true yuan. How is this possible? Qi Huan was caught off guard, and it was too late to react. The rainbow-colored light pierced through his body, dyeing his eyes red. When the dust settled, a white-robed figure silently disappeared. The figure fell to the ground, his blood staining the ground. His eyes were filled with unwillingness and shock. Even in death, he couldn't close his eyes in peace. Not far away, Qi Huan looked at the figure lying in a pool of blood. The grief in his eyes could no longer be concealed. The moment he turned around, tears welled up in his eyes. I hope we don't meet again in the next life. With that, Qi Huan left, disappearing under the setting sun. A cold wind blew, and dust flew up, covering the souls of the deceased. Zichuan, Mo Gates' 7th disciple, had luckily survived 100 years ago. But 100 years later, he still couldn't avoid death. The sorrow of killing one another was no exception to Mo Gates' 9th disciple. The sun set, and the cold moon gradually rose. Green light gathered in the distance. Lulua, who had returned from searching for herbs, looked at the city in the distance. Suddenly, her body fiercely trembled. Zichuan! His silhouette flashed as he rushed forward. Within the collapsed residence, Zichuan was covered in dust. Only his eyes were filled with unwillingness. He looked up at the sky, as if he was complaining about the unfairness of the heavens. Zichuanug! Lulua was filled with grief and pain. Seeing this unbelievable scene, she took 2 steps forward, her body constantly trembling. Lulua, who was kneeling on the ground, was no longer able to maintain her calm. Tears fell one drop after another, falling into the dust. She had once treated him harshly and scolded him time and time again. This was the senior sister's anger towards her junior brother for failing to live up to her expectations. However, in this world, they were each other's last family. How could she really not care about him? A cold wind blew, chilling to the bone. The wind was filled with sorrowful cries. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.